fire drill today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave the building by the various doors with the green signs and gather at the rear car park. This meeting is being recorded and will be streamed to YouTube. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes any of you any concern, please let me know straight away. Okay. Okay. Is that any better? Yep. Okay. But well, welcome to the June meeting of the Planning West Committee. We're not expecting a fire drill today, so if the alarm sounds, please leave the building by the three fire exit doors, all marked with a green sign, and gather at the rear car park. The meeting is being recorded and will be streamed to YouTube. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, can you please let me know? Thank you. Okay, moving on to our agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Pugsley and Councillor Wren, the only ones I have.
Okay, is anybody else aware of any others? No? Okay, thank you. Item 2, minutes from 2 previous meetings. That's the 1st of May and the 21st of May. Is it your wish that I sign them as a true record of those 2 meetings? Proposer and seconder. I have a proposer, please. Thank you, Caroline. A seconder. Thank you. And okay, I will sign them both as a true record of that meeting. Thank you. Those 2 meetings. My apologies. Okay, thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest. I suspect other members of the committee have received a number of pieces of correspondence and emails, and they appertain to item 5, 6, 7, and 8. I'm reasonably sure the rest of us will have had the same, so I'm going to do a blanket declaration if that's okay. Are there any other declarations from members? No? Okay, if that could be duly recorded then, thank you. Okay, item 4 on our agenda is public question time. I'm not aware of anybody registering to speak on that item. No. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to our first application, which is item 5 on your papers, which is 14/22/0051, which is land at Ham Farm, Creek St Michael, and the presenting officer is Gareth Clifford. Good afternoon, Gareth, and welcome. And I wonder whether you'd like to start your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, first application is an application for the installation and operation of solar farm together with associated works, land at Ham, Creek St Michael. So it's a proposal covering around 30 hectares of land with the generation of power to supply around over 5,500 homes, which would offset around 4,600 tonnes of CO2 a year. It's a temporary permission in this instance for 40 years. And main issues are the loss or otherwise of the agricultural land and the visual impact of that. And obviously there's been significant levels of objection to it.
Do you mind holding on a moment? There's still some problems. Could you bring the microphone closer to you?
Yeah. Okay. So that's the site location plan. So
That might follow plans.
right, so the application site
is it now?
outlined there in
Very.
red. White Street running along to the north with the access and construction site coming off there.
It's item
And-
7 and they're on item 4, by the way.
And into
Item
the
4 already?
site.
Well, item 1 was hello and item 2 was who's not here and item 3 was what's the agenda? Yeah. No.
Ask those people online to mute themselves, please, because we're hearing your conversation rather than the presenting officer. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Yes, red line site area and then a view overhead. So the access effectively is coming in off White Street in that position. Then the northern boundary. Yes, you can see the cursor runs along that line, then up and across, down, and then the southern boundary runs along here. And the right of way, particularly through the site, runs down the western boundary, then kinks in to the site, and then follows that route out and through. The list of buildings which are referred to in the report are in this location of the eastern edge of Ham with a grade 2-star building, effectively on the island across the bridge from the roadway. The substation is on the western boundary with access through it to the main road, and that's largely screened from the public right of way through the site as it's off that to the to the west. There's additional planting being put into the north to screen and strengthening of the boundaries through the site, increasing biodiversity. There are a few views, obviously, of the panel details, the transformer and the substation, spares container, fencing for the site, and the CCTV, which is designed into the fencing, security cape for the transformer and for the substation compound, then details of the permeable access track to be put into the site. And this is details of the cross section through the public right of way, where the landscape officer has sought improvements with additional planting and hedging between the right of way and the proposed panels. And I'll now go through the LBIA views that have been put in by the applicant as part of the submission. That effectively shows a view from the Bridge Road, so from a considerable distance to the south. From that distance, it's sectioning through here, where the panels are going. Again, probably the most prominent view from that hill, again, as it is at the moment, as it will be then after 10 years with additional planting along the boundaries on the southern side and through the site. Again, looking towards the site from the Laphill Road, showing what it will be like as it goes in and then after planting. Similarly, from the footpath looking across the site towards the rear of the panels. Again, existing looking there from the footpath towards the Wessex Water Treatment Plant site, which are the large buildings which you can't miss through the site. That's the initial view, and then after planting after 10 years. So now we're within the site looking at the footpath. Brightway route is along the side of that field. That's initial construction and after planting. And if you look effectively looking south up towards that field, and again with and without the screening. This is a view again from the drove to the south near the river, and effectively the section in that will be impacted is through here, so it's less of an impact from a distance. Again, from Knapp, going up the hill, the eastern boundary, again from the right of way to the eastern side of the site, looking at the effectively the southern boundary of the northern boundary of the site, and with them with the planting after the 10 years. Again, within the site, with the planting along the boundary fence line. few photos now of the actual site itself. So this is the southern approach along the public right of way and bridle way. So the site is off to the right-hand side. And again, that's looking at the southern boundary. That's looking within the site from the public right of way across to the east. That's the view effectively down the public right of way, and the hedge line on the left-hand side there is effectively the boundary with the treatment works to the west. That's within the site, looking at back towards the public right of way and the treatment works there in the background. And then panning round to the right, effectively you're looking south, so the boundary of the site effectively is that hedge line in the distance. Again, panning further south, again it's that hedge line on the skyline. So within the site, you're now coming up to the public right of way where it crosses between fields. That's the view from the right of way looking eastward. And you're looking back towards the right of way and the end of the Wessex Water building. Again, this view within the site looking towards the Wessex Water Treatment Works site. You looking along the right of way and the bridle way westward. So effectively at that point you would have panels on both sides of the right of way, but you can see there reasonably well screened by existing hedgerows at that point. So be looking across towards that hill in the site. You're looking towards the treatment works with the substation would be off to the right hand side there behind the hedge line. Again, a view looking towards the west on the right of way. That's looking along the northern boundary of the site, again from the right of way, looking eastward. Again, that's the access towards the substation site to the right hand side. The view from the roadway looking south, so effectively foreground will be planted up with a new orchard. The site starts beyond that line of trees. A few shots from the droveway where it links with the footpath to the that goes up Knapp Hill. So again, the site lies within that section through there. Again, a view from the droveway next to the river looking back. So the site in the distance would be this section through here. Again, starting to go up, footpath in that hill. The site is effectively this section through here. Again, moving up the footway, going up Knapp Hill, it's that section through there where it will be visible. And of course, the higher up you go up Knapp Hill, again, it's this section through here. And again, I mean, that reflects the view that you saw earlier in the LVIA. So it's this section in through here where the fields would be. And again, that's towards the top of Knapp Hill. Section again through here. That's a view looking across the site from the eastern boundary. And again, looking from the east across the site towards the treatment works. The access into the site from itself, where the access will be retained as single track width. That's the visibility towards Ham. That's the visibility in the other direction towards Creech St Michael. And then site goes up the hill towards treatment works site and bears eastward along the existing hedge line and through the fields towards the transformers and substation site. So the key policy considerations are set out in the report, and importantly, CP1 relates to the provision of freestanding renewable energy installations. The Council's climate emergency strategy is a material consideration, as also is EN1 and EN3 of the national policy statements set out by the government. The landscape impact is clearly a major consideration that's been addressed through the LBIA with mitigation planting. The concern has been raised over whether the site is a valued landscape or not, and your council's landscape officer is of the view that that is not the case. Clearly, the development affects grade 3A land, with 67% being grade 3A and the rest of it 3B. And the government, obviously, in the recent written ministerial statement, seeks to protect the grade 1s, 2 and 3, with obviously the greater protection going to the greater value of agricultural land classification. The site is not, the majority of the site is not in an area of flood risk. Small parts of the site lie within zone 2. The flood risk to the site and surroundings has been considered carefully, and all of the statutory consultees now are recommending a condition to address surface water impact runoff from the panels. The axis, as I said, will not be widened, and a construction management, traffic management plan is proposed through a condition as recommended by the Highway Authority. The ecologist is happy with the impact and the net gain that will be achieved through the additional planting proposed. It's not considered that the development will give an unacceptable adverse impact to either heritage assets, water glint and glare, and the place raising no objection in terms of the security and design of the site. The principle of the development is considered to comply with the local and national policy when taken as a whole. And I think that's reflected in the recent appeal decision at Washford. It's not considered that the development will have a significant impact on the landscape character, visual amenity of the area, and the area is not specifically designated. It is partly located on grade 3 agricultural land, and Despite that, it is a temporary installation, and Natural England in the statutory consultee have not raised objections, and the impacts are not considered to be permanent and are reversible. The drainage impacts have been addressed by the statutory consultees and are conditioned, and there aren't considered to be significant adverse impacts which would warrant refusal of the scheme, and the recommendation is one for conditional approval.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary, you had a question?
No, but it would have been nice to hear it.
Okay. I'm going to move to the public speakers now. And the first public speaker on my list is Fletcher Robinson, please. If you could come to the public speaking desk, sir, and when you're comfortable. This desk here, please. When you're comfortable, sir, push the right-hand button on the microphone. Please bring the microphone fairly close to you, if you would be so kind. When you press the right-hand button, the red light will come on, and your 3 minutes start when you begin speaking.
Yes, I'm the planner for CPRE. I'm speaking for CPRE. Members will know that the Tone River Valley at Creech St Michael is one of the most beautiful and iconic landscapes in Somerset. It's unacceptable that not a single image of the river has been shown in the presentation we've just heard. We would be shooting ourselves in the foot if this landscape were to be blighted by 70 acres of glass, metal and plastic. We have to strike a reasonable balance about where such installations go. As the landscape officer Meg Collins pointed out in her response on 23rd of October, most of the landscape character will be changed by this scheme. As appeal inspectors have pointed out, 40 years is most of our lives. If a landscape is intrinsically beautiful as this one can be used for this purpose, we might as well throw in the towel and agree to the entire Area West District being covered in panels. 67% of the site is on BMV land to boot. National policy on BMV land was changed in the written ministerial statement, and that in itself provides a reason for refusal. We sought the assistance of Charles Potterton, the eminent and highly experienced landscape consultant whose quality of work is well known to Somerset Council. Importantly, he pointed out that the Tone River landscape at Creech St Michael qualifies as a valued landscape under the Landscape Institute's criteria for valued landscapes outside designated areas. And his report explains why it scores highly on those criteria. He also said that due to the topography and proximity of footpaths, including the adjacent Drove River road along the river, which you have not been shown, the scheme cannot be adequately screened with additional planting, and therefore this is an unacceptable location. The council's landscape officer, Paul Bryan, also said that the site cannot be screened. The valued landscape finding conveys a high level of protection under the National Planning Policy Framework, and is a very powerful reason for the committee to refuse. It will carry great weight with an appeal inspector. The landscape officer, Meg Collins, only comment online about Charles Potterton's valued landscape finding and his devastating critique of the applicant's confused landscape assessment is that, quote, "I share Charles Potterton's concerns," unquote. In the context of the many strong concerns she has previously expressed about this scheme, this brief comment is unhelpful to the committee. In particular, the case officer should have asked the landscape officer specifically to agree with or refute the valued landscape finding and give reasons for her opinion. This hasn't happened. This is all the more important given that Area East has recently refused under delegated powers an equally large solar farm on Nythe Road at Pedwell Hill, precisely on the grounds that it's a valued landscape and also use it BMV land. I've almost finished, Chairman. The case officer hasn't referred to that decision at all. And
thank you.
We ask that the trustees refuse this application.
Next speaker on my list is Robin Hewish, please. And I would be very grateful if you would stick to 3 minutes. When you're ready, you start speaking. Mr. Hirsch, your 3 minutes start at that point, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Which? The other side? No, you're right there. That's fine. You're on again now. This side? No, you're. Oh, right. Okay. My name is Robin Hewis and I've lived in Ham for 20 years. I'm the chairman of the Ham Flood Committee. I have huge experience of flooding in Ham. In 2008, the Environment Agency spent 600,000 protecting Ham against flooding threats, and we heavily rely on these defences. Ham is a bowl surrounded by flood defences. At time of heavy water or rising groundwater, pumps keep the water out. Our defences rely on a delicate balance between pumped capacity and water entering Ham from the fields and roads, as well as rising water. If the water entering Ham or the speed of it increases, our pumps may not cope. This has happened twice in the last 2 years, where villagers had to operate standby pumps for 48 hours because the standard pumps failed to cope. The road to Ham floods regularly and the frequency and ferocity of the flooding is increasing. The average number of flood alerts in 2015 to 22 was 7. In 2023, it was 16, and we've already had 9 events this year. There is no doubt the frequency is increasing year on year. It is evident that the surrounding fields and that the ground remains saturated and the increased period each year, and this reduces the ability for the water to soak away, increasing reliance on our pumps. Climate change is increasing the ferocity and frequency of weather events, and Ham is under constant and increasing threat. The Drainage Board have apparently approved an objection in the past two days with a phone call with no documentation or consultation with objectors. With this knowledge and all this information, how can the planning be approved? The access details have surface water draining into White Street against Somerset Highway's requirements. This is a Zone 3 flooding area where the water can reach thigh high. 72 acres of panels will significantly change the surface water volume and speed of arrival to the village. Water pouring off the edge of panels will cause channels and streams that will speed the water towards the village and increase the pressure on our pumps. We have no spare capacity. The FRA describes the need for flooding resilience as inappropriate, but there is nothing in the application that answers or mitigates any of the situations that I have outlined. No review has been carried out on the effects of Ham. No review has been on the approach to Ham or to the safety and security of the people and their property. The officer report states that it doesn't matter because the solar farm is not manned. Well, it does matter because I live there and so does 80 other people. And when you've all made your decision and gone home, it will be the villagers of Ham that have to live with it for the rest of their life. I ask you to refuse this application.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch.
One second.
The next speaker is Billy Morris, please. Billy Morris with us, lovely, thank you. If you'd like to come to the public speaking desk, same rules as for everyone else. The microphone is on. When you're ready and you start speaking, your 3 minutes begins.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. No, you've just turned it off. Yeah, that's it. You're on now.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is William Morris and I am the co-founder of One Tree Farm, located in Knapp, just 250 metres away from the proposed site. We purchased 13.5 acres of bare agricultural land last year and have since transformed it into a small but thriving regenerative farm. The land is proving to be highly fertile, with our holding now supporting several regenerative food producing enterprises, as well as being home to an abundant and diverse array of wildlife. At One Tree Farm, we believe that a community's wealth is measured by the health of its land. Our mission is to build health from the soil up, enhancing biodiversity, improving the water cycle, supporting carbon sequestration, and increasing resilience to climate change. Our efforts aim to ensure the land can sustain us and future generations, providing food security for our community. Small-scale, local and resilient food systems are crucial to combating the climate crisis, and fertile agricultural land should be prioritised for these types of food production. Our farm also has a dedicated space for community gatherings, with the goal to raise awareness of regenerative farming practices, soil health, environmental stewardship, and the importance of sustainable local food systems, with a particular focus on providing opportunities to inspire the next generation to take the necessary steps towards environmental stability. We hold weekly sessions for families to visit the farm and have already introduced hundreds of children to low-impact sustainable agriculture, inspiring the next generation of environmental stewards. We are providing the community with pastured eggs, pastured pork, 100% grass-fed beef, organic vegetables, Christmas turkeys and geese, with a raw milk micro dairy and silvo pasture fruit tree orchard coming into commercial production soon. Government policy states developers should prioritise previously developed land, brownfield sites and industrial land over agricultural land. If agricultural land must be used, poorer quality land should be preferred to the best and most versatile. The government's Powering Up Britain Energy Security Plan emphasised the need to balance energy production with food security, advising against using higher quality agricultural land for solar development. I would like to make it clear that I am not against renewable energy and our farm is powered entirely by solar. But if the proposal is approved, our farm's rural setting will be destroyed, replaced by a sea of 40,000 industrial solar panels. We will be sandwiched between this new development and the existing solar plant at Knapp. This will significantly detract from the farm's current view over the valley, which is a source of inspiration and enjoyment, particularly for the low-income families who regularly visit the farm for respite. We are not just objecting this application for our farm, but for the future of local food security, community well-being and environmental stewardship. We ask that you use your influence as promised in your vision for the new plan to support nature restoration and regenerative farming by refusing this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Next speaker is Nicola Burley. It would help, we've got a very, very busy agenda. It would help if you desist from applauding the various speakers. Thank you. Nicola Burley, please. Is on. No, you're here. No, Nicola Burley wrote in and said she was coming.
The real me,
Again,
not the virtual
so
me.
don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Nicola, whenever you're ready, please, your 3 minutes start when you start speaking. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a heritage planning consultant with 30 years experience in both the public and private sector. I identified failings in the applicant's first heritage impact submission. Not all listed buildings that could be impacted by the proposal were identified, and there was no acknowledgement of the importance of the navigable River Tone and Ham Wharf to the history of Taunton and to national history as one of the oldest waterways in England. Management of the Tone as a navigable waterway dates back to the 14th century. By the end of the 16th century, cargoes were hauled to Ham Wharf from Boroughbridge and were unloaded there. The importance of the watercourse was so great that it was improved in 1638 as a philanthropic act to improve the lives of the town's poor. The wealth generated by the transport of goods is illustrated by the extremely high quality and unusual detailing of Cole Harbour House, resulting in its listing at Grade 2 star, where Grade 2 star buildings represent only 5.8% of the nation's listed buildings. The omissions in the applicant's first heritage appraisal mean that the proposal was designed and submitted without full awareness of the significance of the historic environment that it would affect. The applicant's second heritage appraisal identified 3 further listed buildings that could be affected, including highly graded Cole Harbour House, but still did not discuss the national significance of the navigable Tone and Ham Wharf and did not propose any mitigation against harm to the historic environment. It can readily be seen that the well-conserved rural setting of the Tone and the listed buildings at Ham Wharf make a positive contribution to their significance. National planning policy requires that heritage assets should be conserved so that they can be enjoyed for their contribution to the quality of life of existing and future generations. Appeal decisions have found that a temporary approval of 25 years is a significant amount of time. This proposal for a 40-year period would cause harm to the enjoyment of the historic environment for a generation. The proposal harms the historic environment because it harms the surroundings of heritage assets, and those surroundings make a contribution to their significance. The planning balance exercise presented to you by officers states that the proposal would not adversely impact the setting of any heritage assets. The evidence put before you here shows that it would. National planning policy states that great weight should be given to the conservation of heritage assets, and the more important the asset, the greater the weight should be. To fail to understand the impact of the proposal upon listed buildings, notably upon the significance of highly graded 2-star Cole Harbour House, is to err in the consideration of the law. In determining this application, Are you fully aware of the nature of the significance of the group of listed buildings at Ham Wharf, of the importance of the navigable tone, what harm the proposal will cause to that significance, and whether there could be mitigation to reduce that harm? If you are not, you cannot safely determine this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Your timing was perfect. Thank you. The next speaker is Tim Taylor, who I believe is online. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, good morning, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Your 3 minutes start when you start speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Tim Taylor. I'm a planning lawyer and represent the Ham Conservation Group and CPRE Somerset. Apologies, I cannot be with you in person. Members, this is a highly controversial application for good planning reasons. Reading the officer's report, you'd be forgiven for thinking that everything's fine, but it's not, as you've already heard. I would like to expand briefly on two fundamental issues. First, BMV. The officer update says that whilst the new WMS is a material consideration, it hasn't changed anything. Really? Logically, that must be wrong. If that was the case, why did the government publish it? In fact, the WMS has moved the policy goalposts, and rightfully so. Before the WMS was published, poorer quality agricultural land was to be preferred to higher quality land. However, under the WMS, higher quality land is now the least appropriate for solar farms. That's a tightening of national policy all day long, although not according to your officer. It creates a assumption, call it what you will, that poorer quality land must be unavailable before higher quality land can even be considered. That requires a robust site selection process, but the applicant has not done this by any stretch of the imagination. Its site search understandably predates the WMS, was retrospective, limited in scope, and is now next to useless. As you've heard, the LPA for Mendit refused permission under delegated powers for a solar farm at Nyde Road. It referenced the WMS and rightly concluded that the alternative site assessment had been inadequate. Consistency in decision-making is of paramount importance, and Somerset should apply the new stricter test to the WMS in a consistent manner. Second, flooding. The development will cause flooding. You've heard this from the local community who know the area best. Even the applicant's FRA confirms there will be a flood hazard danger for most. That's worth repeating, danger for most. So how does the officer recommend this danger is addressed? Through conditions. This is fundamentally wrong. If a planning issue goes to the heart of the proposed development, and this one clearly does, it must be fully assessed, understood, and how the harm will be mitigated before permission can be granted. That is both the law and common sense. You have not been provided with any evidence of how the danger will be managed, mainly because the applicant's FRA states that the flood resilience strategy will not be needed, despite accepting danger for most. And in many cases, flood mitigation can't be delivered anyway. For example, there is a draft condition which requires SUDs, but, and this is something which the officer hasn't told you, there is no room on the site for any SUDs. It will need a redesign. Members, this is a poor application which lacks essential information. It will cause danger to most, but hasn't shown how or if that danger will be avoided. It has not been shown that it needs to be located on BMV contrary to the WMS. It would be bad planning to approve it, so please refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Again, your timing was impeccable. Thank you. The next speaker is Vanessa Becker-Hughes, please. Is Vanessa here? Good afternoon. The microphone is on, so your 3 minutes start when you're comfortable and you start speaking. Okay.
I have lived in Somerset all of my life and have always had a strong interest in ecology and conservation. I understand the unbreakable connection with our changing climate. I'm a former chair of my local and successful environmental group, Green Wedmore, an associate of the Natural Beekeeping Trust and founder of the Somerset Eel Recovery Project. I also know about solar farms, having built one for my village in 2013, a 1 megawatt solar array, Wedmore Community Solar Cooperative. At the time, this was the second largest of its kind in the UK. In our historic village of Wedmore, we faced some of the concerns and issues around the cultural values of older listed buildings and its appropriateness within the local landscape, which I'm sure villagers of Ham are grappling with today. Looking at the bigger picture, we urgently need to reduce our carbon emissions, which is vital to us all and generations that lay ahead. Old buildings, as beautiful as they are, sadly will not save us. I know and understand this issue is hard. 10 years on, our solar array has been a huge success and is well accepted by the community. The new hedges planted for screening have grown full. The panels provide a stable soil environment and the habitat for nature has increased. Sheep happily graze and shelter underneath the panels too. I'm proud to have contributed directly to the supply of green energy in Somerset. Everyone here today can make a difference and I hope this is shown by giving positive support to this project. Sadly, I probably wouldn't be able to repeat a project like mine today and get a grid connection to the electricity grid, and with no government incentives, our project would not be viable. We need to support well thought out commercial projects. There are not many places in Somerset where you could build a solar farm. Much of the landscape is rightly protected. There is a lot of high quality farmland and it's all but impossible to connect to the grid. But Ham Solar has obtained a connection, which means it can be set up and running quickly, generating the green power Somerset desperately needs. Not only will it help meet the county's net zero targets, but the site will provide important habitats for wildlife. The solar farm will not lead to the permanent loss of any farmland and is completely reversible. How much better for the environment than a new housing development or a supermarket? We have all seen recently the desperate plight of many of the country's farmers facing extreme weather caused by climate change. Solar farms are part of that solution, not the problem, and provide an income that allows farmers to continue cultivating the rest of their land. I hope the committee agrees and votes to approve this application for more solar power for a greener, better future for Somerset.
Thank you. Your timing is impeccable. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tim Walker, which I understand is a statement to be read by Sophie Fernley-Whittingstall. Is Sophie Fernley-Whittingstall here? Excellent. If you'd be kind enough to come to the microphone. Again, the microphone is on, so when you're comfortable and start speaking, your 3 minutes start then.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm here today to speak strongly in favour of solar farms and in particular the Ham project. I've lived in Taunton for 9 years now and care deeply about Somerset. I'm a husband, a stepfather and a small shop owner in the county town. We're in the middle of a climate crisis that is steadily getting worse due to the reluctance of people to make small changes and sacrifices for future generations. Weather is growing increasingly erratic. Sea levels are rising. Promises are made and then broken. We have all the answers though. We've had the solutions right in front of us for decades, most of which are so easily implemented, and yet inaction, complacency, and NIMBYism seems to triumph. It is everyone's responsibility to make these changes, to invest in the future of Earth, and that means embracing renewable energy to get us away from fossil fuels. Harnessing nature like solar, wind, and tidal energy is a brilliant way to move away from CO2 creating industries way quicker and cheaper than nuclear, and so solar farms make perfect sense, especially here in Somerset, where we have great sunlight and a lower population density. Yes, it would have been amazing if it had been made a legal requirement for all new build homes to come with rooftop solar panels years ago, so every home could provide its own energy. But that hasn't happened and doesn't look like it will anytime soon. So we need to find other ways to power our future. Ways like solar farms. The plans for Ham Solar Farm have been thoroughly scrutinised, impact assessments have been carried out, and due diligence followed throughout the whole process. So there should be no reason why Somerset Council wouldn't support this solar farm to help get to its target of generating 45% of the county's energy from renewables by 2050, when we're only at around 5% currently. Solar farms have so many benefits, from helping improve biodiversity, providing shade for animals, and of course, being a very efficient way to power over 5,000 homes with clean and green energy in this case. and our need for electricity isn't reducing. EVs, a growing population, TVs, phones and other tech, it's imperative that we all have access to clean energy. We can't keep delaying solutions, putting things off, saying they're other people's problems. We have an amazing opportunity to really move the dial in a positive direction and do something good for the planet, for the people of Somerset. Surely everybody would want to be able to stand up and say that they tried, that they did their bit to avert climate catastrophe. No one would want to be remembered as the person who said, no, I don't want to leave the world in a better state than we found it. Imagine explaining that to your children and your grandchildren, why you stood in the way of greener energy and a better future. Let's hope that Somerset can become a forward-thinking county of hope and progress.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is Andrew Williams, please, the clerk to the Preach St Michael Parish Council. Again, so the microphone is on. When you are comfortable and ready, your 3 minutes starts when you begin speaking.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Williams. I am the clerk at Creech St Michael Parish Council and speaking on their behalf. Creech St Michael Parish Council is fully supportive of the installation of solar power generation sites within its parish. In recent weeks, it gave its support for a sympathetically cited installation within the village of Creech St Michael and did all that it could to facilitate the progress of the planning application for the site. This application, however, and the resulting loss of 30 acres of prime Somerset farming land is unacceptable to the Parish Council. According to Somerset 3D, the Inward Investment Service for Somerset, the county is at the forefront of the food and drink industry with an established reputation for high quality produce that is more than just cheese and cider. It is a buoyant £500 million plus sector with a dynamic and dedicated network of over 8,500 farmers and food producers, the highest number of food producers in any UK county. Those food producers need farms and farmers for local food production, and those farmers need fields of the best and most valuable quality to produce the crops that sustain the food production industry. If Somerset loses its identity as a farming and food production county, then it not only loses economically, but also socially and politically, and will have far less influence over the national food and farming agenda. After all, haven't we learnt firsthand in recent years of the importance of national and regional food security? In a written ministerial statement given in May this year, the Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero stated the government was concerned that as large solar developments proceed at pace, more of our best and most versatile land could be used for solar PV instead of food production, and that the starting position for solar PV developers is that applicants should seek to minimise impacts on the best and most versatile agricultural land and preferably use land in areas of poorer quality. The Minister went on to encourage the deployment of rooftop solar, describing it as a priority for government. I am sure that I don't need to remind the committee of the forthcoming application for the MH2 development within the parishes of Creech St Michael and West Monkton that could, if it were directed to, deliver somewhere in the region of 15,000 rooftop solar panels. This proposal hinges on the notion that solar installation should be considered a temporary installation, and to quote the case officer, as a result of this, there would be no permanent or irreversible loss of high quality agricultural land with the ability to potentially provide less intensive agricultural activity on the site being retained. Whilst the national policy framework treats solar installations as temporary, there is no current evidence that they will be temporary and that in 30 or 40 years' time, new technology will be installed to prolong the life of the installation. No other site in the United Kingdom has yet reached the end of its initial proposed lifespan, and so the temporary nature of these installations has yet to be tested. So the test as applied by the case officer is that this type of development on this type of agricultural land shall only be granted on an exceptional basis if the presumption in favour of sustainable development outweighs the need to protect it. More than two-thirds of the
3 minutes, Mr. Williams.
Just finish one paragraph.
Did you bring it to the?
Yeah, well, more than two-thirds of the proposed site is categorised as BMV. Government policy has consistently aimed to protect valuable farmlands. Therefore, the Parish Council would ask the committee to carefully measure the application against the test outlined previously. Namely, is this such an exceptional application to justify the need to protect a significant portion of Somerset's best and most versatile land?
Councillor David Fothergill is the next speaker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this is a new experience anyway. I'm not sure how many of you know Ham. I'm not sure how many of you have been there. It's a very small hamlet. It's the sort of place people go on holiday if they don't live in Somerset. They would come to because it's a great place to go and a great place to visit. And it's been my privilege to represent it for 15 years. During that time, there have been numerous occasions that Ham has been cut off by flooding, and even the 600,000 bunds that the Environment Agency put in, built several years ago, do not protect the centre of the hamlet where this development is proposed. And in fact, many of you will know that Wessex Water had to build their own access roads. One of the reasons for this is because of the flooding that kept cutting off Ham. It is a hamlet totally dependent upon the goodwill of its residents. You've heard today when the roads are cut off. Flooding might make access to this site impassable. And yet, despite the frequent flooding, Ham is a beautiful area. It is a classic, iconic Somerset landscape with the rivers, the moors and the backdrop of undulating landscape, topped by the copse on Thornhill. Thornhill, where the future King Charles II made camp to besiege Taunton and fired cannonballs over this site, unfortunately landed in Creech St Michael churchyard. Adjacent is Fishpool Copse, owned and protected by this council as an important local heritage asset. Where is the South West Heritage Report on those two really important heritage sites? The downplaying of the impact of flooding and the emphasis on the sewage treatment plant are aimed solely at detracting from the beauty of what exists in Ham, the valued landscape, the rich tapestry of history, and the excellent fertile fields which have supported generations of their basic needs for local people. This is why 2 parish councils have objected to this development. This is why there's been over 150 objections. And this is why you have today heard so much concern about the development. You've heard about the 67% most versatile land, which would now be built upon and which should be preserved for food production. You've heard today from a new regenerative farmer who can bring experience to only 13 acres. Somerset Council has said that it will use its influence to support regenerative farming. And in its vision and priority states, the council will use its influence to support nature-friendly and regenerative farming systems, which also produce food and sustainable livelihoods. I turn to the flood risks. I've asked at 2 full councils, where is the policy on building solar farms in flood areas in this county? It doesn't exist. It exists in Essex and Bedfordshire and North Lincolnshire, and of course in Doncaster, well known for flooding. But in the county where flooding is most likely, we do not have that policy. Finally, I turn to even-handedness. Another solar farm at Planning East and Neath was refused recently. You've heard why. It would be very strange to approve this application and not treat all applications with the same level of even-handedness across the county.
Thank you, David. As ever, your timing is perfect. Thank you. The final speaker on this is Richard Turner, please. Mr. Turner. The microphone is on when you're settled and start speaking. Your 3 minutes begin then. So when you're ready.
Somerset has experienced its wettest 18 months since records began, leaving farmers struggling to plant crops in waterlogged fields and communities disrupted by flooding. Climate change has made these weather events worse. It is impossible to ignore the need to tackle the climate emergency. I know this council will agree that doing nothing is not an option. Indeed, DEFRA's UK food security report identified that the biggest threat to food security is climate change. This is not an application that's been rushed through. This is one which your officers have diligently reviewed and assessed over the last 18 months, seeking guidance from experts, ultimately culminating in the recommendation for approval before you. This is an application for development identified by the government as a critical national priority, and it has no objections from any of your internal experts or statutory consultees. As we have heard, there are those that do not agree with these professional assessments. The council can, however, be confident that the Secretary of State was asked by the CPRE to review the EIA screening and confirmed that the council has undertaken this correctly. I don't wish to repeat details you've already heard, but believe there are some very important points which need to be clarified. The recent ministerial statement is entirely aligned with national policy which was adopted in January this year. It's already a material consideration in this application, as your officers have highlighted. Contrary to what has been said by some, there is no new test that has been introduced. We carried out a very thorough site selection assessment. This study area for this covers 22,000 acres of land, the majority of which is either grade 1 or grade 2. That is the highest agricultural land grades, or flood zone 3. As we've heard from speakers, we did actually follow the specific policy requirements which steered this project to the lowest land grade available. Importantly, the site is not used for growing food, but grazing cattle, sheep, and growing animal feed. Crucially, this site falls within the solar resource area identified within this council's own detailed energy study published in April this year. We have heard that flooding is a local challenge. The Environment Agency, Local Flood Authority, and Drainage Board have all reviewed the project and raised no objections. As a responsible developer, we are committed to delivering a project that does not make existing flooding any worse. We understand that nobody likes to see change in the countryside. However, your landscape officer raises no objections. A year ago, this committee refused an application for Washford Solar Farm close to the Quantock Hills and Exmoor National Park. The appeal for this was allowed 3 weeks ago. Importantly, this project is not within the setting of a national park or national landscape as that was. Its impacts are very localised, in line with local and national policy, and the small harm is outweighed by the overriding and significant benefits of renewable energy. Thank you, and I hope that you will support your officer's recommendations for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Right, that's the end of the public speakers on this item. Mr. Clifford, is there anything you'd like to come back on? If you bring the microphone fairly close to you before I open it up to the councillors. Thank you.
Only briefly, I'd like to mention the fact that the conservation officer is happy with the submission, and Historical England have not objected to the scheme.
Colleagues. Rosemary?
Thank you, Chairman. I was tempted not to turn up today because only a fortnight or so ago, the appeal against a decision of this council came to light, and they had gone against the wishes of this council to create a solar farm, not to create a solar farm. We voted against it at Washford, and I thought, why am I going to hear all this again? But thankfully, the arguments today have been well balanced. It doesn't change my mind about prime agricultural land not being the place for solar panels. We have houses which could take solar panels on them being built, some of them being applied for today. So why don't we encourage those not taking up our agricultural land? I'm sorry, I will listen to what everybody has to say, but at the moment, I'm not inclined to support this application.
Okay, thank you, Rosemary. And of course, the answer to solar panels on every new build is something that will have to come through as something through building control and building regulations. That means the government needs to do it. And the current government is unlikely, I think. Annie Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. This committee has agreed and denied several planning applications for solar panels. Each application has to be dealt with in its own merits. Even regardless of whether one is denied and then later approved on appeal, this has to be determined on its own merits. I do have 3 concerns listening to what's been said today. The first one is that over 20 hectares is going to, of best and most versatile land, is going to be used and covered over for the next 40 years. And I do have a problem with 40 years being temporary. This has risen once before, and I can't imagine why 40 years should be temporary, but I'll have to think about that one. Second issue I've got is what I've heard about the flooding in Ham. The people of Ham are the people that know what happens in Ham. They're the best people to know how things work and what they have to do to get around it. But not only that, it gives you big problems to actually access the site if there's a problem. Water and electricity don't mix, and if there is a big problem in Ham, how do the emergency services get in there? And the other one that I'm battling with at the moment is the River Tone. It hasn't been mentioned in the officer's report. I know that Heritage England haven't, Historic England haven't mentioned it, or haven't raised any objections, but there are some heritage assets there that have to be protected. So at the moment, I am sitting on a fence, getting splinters. I don't want to object to solar panels because I think it is the way forward, but I do think there have to be local considerations made as to whether it's appropriate in that place or the size is appropriate. So I shall listen with intent and make my decision.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, Harrow, followed by Andy Sully, please.
Oh dear, okay. No. Don't squeak, don't squeak. Okay, yeah, I think I am actually minded to approve this one. We look at different solar panel farm proposals, and we, as Andy said, we look at them on their individual merits, and they're all different. We desperately need more renewable energy in this country, and it's a question of have you got the right provision in the right place. And like anybody else, I'd rather we didn't have to do this stuff on green fields at all and in the countryside, but we've been left no choice by central government, which could have, as previous speakers have said, could have actually legislated to ensure that all homes and all buildings are built with renewable energy, but they haven't done that. So we are in a climate emergency. We have no option but to dramatically increase the level of renewable energy in this country. Thinking about the land, are we taking the land out of use for agriculture? Well, not necessarily. I don't think the future of agriculture in this country relies on a move away from animal agriculture. So it relies on a dramatic reduction in the use of land for animal agriculture, and it relies on a huge an increase, which you need less land for in terms of plant-based organic agriculture, which you can easily do under photovoltaic panels. So you could still farm that land and you could still actually produce food in a much more beneficial way. So I'm convinced on the issue of the climate emergency. Also, I'm impressed by the level of biodiversity gain that would be entailed by this, something like 20%. So that's not to be sneezed at. To me, when I look at the countryside and I see a field of photovoltaics, I think, hooray. And I was looking at the photos that were presented and I couldn't quite see how this was going to be a blot on the landscape. I could conceive that there would be a proposal that could be, but the way that the hedging and everything and the screening seemed to me that it wouldn't be to the detriment of the landscape. The only thing that I am a bit concerned about is the flooding, and I would like us to go, can we just go over that again? What are the conditions being imposed if we approve this in terms of mitigating any additional risk to the village? I mean, again, the issue is if we can address climate change more radically, there will be less extreme weather and we will see less flooding events. So it's a bit of a sort of circular thing, but could the officer go over what's the mitigation specifically in relation to flooding?
Just before I bring Councillor Sully in, I'll ask Mr. Clifford, you can just come back on the flooding and local lead flood authority.
Yes, both the Lead Local Flood Authority and the Environment Agency were recommending conditions which were 12 and 17 in your papers. In our view, the majority of the site is not in the flood risk zone, and there's clearly space within the site to provide a sustainable urban drainage system which would collect surface water from the panels and not result in an increase in flood risk.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. Was that okay, Carl?
sorry, this should be obvious from the papers, but I don't remember. So what specific provision is there within the proposal again that will mitigate against this? There is adequate provision. Have we deemed that there is adequate provision, or are we conditioning it?
We're conditioning it under condition 17.12.
Okay, Andy Solid, followed by councillor Haviv Farahai, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like some clarity, please, on the most versatile land. Was the saying that it's 2/3 of the site is the best and most versatile land, which is obviously we said the categories grade 1, 2, 3A and 3B. So 2/3 of this is that type of land. Because when we had the planning application that was at Washford, which comes under the West Somerset planning rules, one of the key decisions for us when we turned it down was it was on best, most versatile land. Is the planning policies in the Taunton Deane area different in the sense that we don't have a policy for best, most versatile land, because there seems to be a bit of a conflict there, because if it's good enough for West Somerset, it's good enough for the Taunton Deane area in terms of planning. So if you're just doing it just down simply on a planning, one's got a planning policy, one hasn't, we should look at it in terms of what is the government saying. I thought the government was saying now that you shouldn't build on best and most versatile land. So my mind's a bit muddled up in that. I just need some clarity on that, please. Thank you.
Gareth, if you'd like to come back first, then I'll bring Martin in, try and get some clarity for us.
Yes, thank you. The site area is 67% grade A, 3A. So that falls into the BMV category. 3B is outside of that category. So 1/3 of the site is not, but 2/3 is. Just to clarify that. Yes, you're right in saying that while there is a specific BMV protection policy in the West Somerset local plan, there isn't one within the Taunton Deane one. But clearly the government policy in terms of the national guidance applies to both.
Okay, I'm going to bring Martin Evans in, our solicitor. Martin?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up that last point. In January this year, the government issued new policy guidance, EN3, in relation to, amongst other things, solar arrays. And that said that ground-mounted solar arrays are not prohibited on best and most versatile agricultural land, but obviously you need to consider the impacts. And it also said that it's likely that applicants' development will use some agricultural land, but applicants should explain their choice of site, noting the preference for development to be on either brownfield, industrial, or low and medium grade agricultural land. So that's a preference for that. Now, Mr. Taylor, in his speech, made reference to the written ministerial statements, which came out only last month. Now, I read that ministerial statement as sort of expanding upon the earlier January document, explaining how that policy should be applied and balancing these competing interests of food security and energy security. And my reading and my advice is that that written ministerial statement doesn't change the policy that came in January. It just explains how it should be applied. What it does say is that due weight must be given to the use of best and most versatile land, and the higher quality land, the use of higher quality land is the least appropriate. But that is different from saying there's a prohibition on using that land, but there is a greater emphasis for developers to justify their choice of site if higher grade land is being used. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're still on the first round of councillors, so I'm going to go to Councillor Farahai and then Derek Perry, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question and a couple of clarification points, if I may. Is the land currently being used as grazing land or arable land? And I tend to agree with Councillor Hadley earlier comments on the fact that 40 years is a lifespan of new home these days, and I think we should actually look at things, a bit more carefully. The other point was that I'm going to make is, I think we all know that both districts, county and district, were under different administration, and I asked the same question: why didn't we have the policy for flood risk assessment then? Thank you.
Okay, Gareth, do you know the answer to the land question?
It was grazing land, certainly at the time of my 2 site visits when I was taking the photos. I haven't been out within the last month to confirm that it's still all grazing land.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
I spoiled my joke, didn't it? I turned 41 on Friday, which means as a matter of planning law, I think I'm now permanent on this earth. That aside, it's about the BMV, isn't it? I mean, there are other issues at hand, of course there are, but we've had this kind of issue in relation to other applications before. It seems to me that when it comes to BMV, there are clear statements about preferring non-BMV land, of course there are, but there is a matter of fact and degree. ALC, Agricultural Land Classification, at the top of the tree, grade 1, then grade 2, then grade 3A, then grade 3B, then 4, then 5. I think I'm right in saying we've previously considered applications for solar farms where there's been some grade 2 land involved, but that's kind of by the by. Where we are here, of course, is a situation where 2/3 of it is 3A, the rest is 3B. It doesn't change the fact that 3A, the line between 3A and 3B is the line between BMV and non-BMV. But we are talking, if I can put it this way, the least BMV of the BMV categories. Now, that becomes relevant, even though it seems like quite a sort of fine distinction, when we're looking at the alternative sites that might be available and the justification has been put forward for this particular site. And actually, from what I've heard and what I've read, it does appear that this site has been selected for good reasons. There is no hard and fast rule against the use of all BMV. It must stand to reason that if some BMV has to be lost to or is considered for loss to a solar farm, then the lower category is the preference rather than higher grade land. It may be clearly there are arguments both way on this, but when you weigh it all up and look at the availability of the connection, consider the fact that this is a county where there are many, many areas of land that simply are untouchable in terms of alternative power generation because of their protected status. Although I see the arguments both ways, I think on balance I support this one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ross Henley, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. A couple of the questions I was going to ask have been asked. The fact that if this land is taken out of potential food production, it's been used for grazing at the moment, and also looking at the report and I heard what members of the public have said and other objectors and contributors. If you look at the report, it's the officer recommendation is for approval. And then you look at the landscape officer who says manages measures to mitigate the impact of the landscape character have been included. And then you go on Natural England saying the proposed development will not have significant effects on the Somerset levels and moors. We already heard Caroline Ellis mention the fact and raise the thing I was going to raise about the Lead Flood Authority, that they are happy to condition and there are conditional places to mitigate the risk of flooding. And with all that in mind, on balance, and particularly I think it's quite pertinent, I've asked this question before when we've had solar farm applications regarding the land, because we do often hear about it's removing potential farmland, that it's being used for grazing, and the fact that with these contributors and consultees have not raised objection or asked for mitigation and conditioning, and the fact that it's got officer recommendation, and with all those consultees not raising formal objections, and the fact is up for approval, and in light of what we've heard before on the application in West Somerset, which was lost on appeal, I think I'm leaning towards supporting the application as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Henley. Councillor Cowell, please.
I thought I was going to have one that didn't work for a minute. Interesting, isn't it? People talking about, is it arable or is it grazing? Dear, oh dear, you don't know the difference, do you? It's 3A land. It's best and most versatile. In this county, as in Ireland, we have good rainfall and we can grow grass and how. And therefore we graze cattle and produce milk for food. 3A land is equally well capable of being ploughed and growing crops as well as the farm just across the boundary at 25 acres is doing and doing very well. This is first class land. But you are saying between you, and I respect our learned friend, the Vice Chairman's advice there, that BMV is not the be all and end all. So let me start back 50 odd years ago. I'm sorry about that, Derek. 50 odd years ago, I was newly married and didn't want to live with mum and dad. So I went down and rented a property in Ham called Ham Lock. Definitely not the thing to do because by that time it was a very damp wall against the lock. But I learned a lot about Ham whilst I was there. And one of the things that hasn't even been mentioned is that it's tidal right the way up through there. And we are facing climate change. And with it comes rougher seas and backing up the channels coming in to the moors and levels. And that backs water all the way up, further and further. The IDB, who have local knowledge in spades, as do the people who've spoken here today, have said you should have some catchment from this site. And we're going to condition it. Jolly good. Where's it going to be? There's nowhere shown on that site there's going to be a balancing pond. Any development that takes place anywhere in this area is supposed to be less runoff than from a greenfield site. But this site is perfectly all right to run off the same or even maybe a little bit faster. And as for it all being put back to arable land in 40 years' time, well, I shan't be here to see it. Sorry, that was a slip of the tongue, wasn't it? Arable land. Being put back into farming use. Maybe it will be. Maybe it won't be. They've got to get all the concrete out. Previously, we've heard they haven't done that. Oh, this is going to be supported by steel structures. And then it goes on to mention in part of the report, concrete footers, etc. It's all going to have to come out. Oh, and the drip coming off the panels won't carve channels because we'll remove it and either plant or put gravel in there. Guess which is going to get done? And it's all going to be picked up, every last lump, to return the farm back to farmland again. Somehow I don't think so. What was very noticeable from the photographs that we were shown at length was the clarity in them. What was even more noticeable was that there wasn't one photograph from the southwest corner of that site. That is the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, where there's another property. And when you look back to Ham, and it's all right, it's over and down, but when you look up to Knapp, it's running up through. You're looking into the site. It is very visible, all right, from that area there. Screening, maybe it will screen, maybe it won't screen, I don't know. But we've heard from people that are professionals that this will have a big impact on the Tone Valley. I think that is one reason for making a comment and not supporting this scheme. There's heritage assets there that have been well listed that aren't taken into account well enough on this, and that is another ground to refuse it. And I think flooding of adjoining property, which is probably at higher risk with more water coming off, is another reason to raise the question. And I, as an agricultural person, of course, would say taking any land like this out of use to produce food when we're only 60%, when we know that we have a climate emergency in the world and that the vast majority of really productive land is below 100 feet above sea level, and many migrants are going to be coming to other areas like Britain simply because their area is flooded. no, food security is a sound grant too, I think. So guess what, Mr. Chairman? I don't think I can support this application as it stands.
Okay, thank you. Now, everybody's who wanted to speak has spoken, so we're going to round two for the councillors now, and the first one to catch fire was Andy Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points going on what was being said. The flooding attenuation, does that mean if we're going to attenuate the runoff flooding from 30 hectares, Han is now safe? We just stop them being flooded because we're stopping all the water running off? I can't see that happening. The water is going to run off. You can't attenuate all the water from that site. I just can't see that happening. And the food security, I understand what Councillor Ellis was saying. You know, new food production practices don't need as much land, but if you have the same amount of land, means you can produce even more. So it could work both ways. So I am sort of edging against this application.
Rosemary, did you want to come back? And then I'll bring in Andy.
I just wondered, we've got 67% best quality land. Does that mean the rest is the flooded land?
Able to answer that, Gareth?
No, I'm not, in that I don't have a breakdown in terms of what bits of the site are grade 3A and 3B. What I can say is the majority of the site doesn't actually flood. It's not in the flood risk zone.
Okay, Andy Shelley, please.
Thank you. I'd like some clarity where this SUD would be positioned, because obviously if you've got 30 hectares, 75 acres of land, and there's a big downpour and it hits the solar panels and it just all goes off in one direction, where is this SUD going to be? Is it on their land? Are they going to buy some land next door? And how big would a SUD have to be to accommodate 30 hectares of rainwater? Thank you.
There's a whole area of land set aside for compensatory planting in relation to screening of the site, which is set aside for orchard, which could also be utilised for SUD scheme.
If I could come back, you haven't actually really worked it out yet then, where the rainwater is going to go. You're saying it could be this, could be that, we could use this. I mean, I'd like to see this deferred. We need definite answers if it's going to be flooding, where this water is going to go. You can't seem to be able to answer the question. Thank you.
No, that's the point of the condition that was suggested by the Lead Flood Authority and the Environment Agency.
The Lead Flood Authority and the Environment Agency are happy with the suggestions that have come for this development. They're not raising an objection. Okay. Any other councillor wish to comment or speak or ask a question on this? Ross?
Yeah, all due respect to Councillor Stanley, I would not be in favour of deferring this application, particularly as you just pointed out that the relevant authorities have already suggested and proposed some mitigation. I'd want to cheekily comment on what Councillor Cavill said. And then he said that we talked about that the land is currently utilised for grazing, but it could be potentially used for other purposes in terms of food production. But my point is, it isn't at the moment, is it? That's the point I would say. It is being used for grazing at the moment.
Of course, you can come back, Norman. Of course you may.
As I was named, Mr. Chairman, actually grazing could be sheep, could be cattle, could be cows. It's all food production.
Okay, so we're at the end of the questions from councillors and the end of this discussion. So we're at a position where there is a recommendation for approval. So I need to see a proposer for that, please, and a seconder. And if the committee is minded to go against the officer's recommendation, then we need to consider on what grounds you are going to look at that. So we're going to start with your proposal. Thank you. And your second, Carol, thank you. Okay. So we've now got a proposer and a seconder for this to see to approve this application as it is. So can I see those in favour, please? Aye. Those against, please. Three. Okay, so that application is, right, and one abstention? One abstention, thank you. So that's carried, thank you. The application is carried, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6. We've got a very full agenda today. So we're going to move to item 6 on our agenda, which is 17/21/0007, which is Knights Farm, Cats Ash Road, Fitzhead. And the planning officer for this is Anthony Fick. Anthony, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you, Mr. Clifford. When you're ready, Anthony. Thank you, Claire.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Chair. So this application is for the conversion of traditional barns into forward dwellings for associated site works. The application is located to the west of Fitzhead. So application site is identified in red. It's approximately half a kilometre from the western boundary of the settlement boundary of Fitzhead. It's located in the conservation area. So we've got two parts of the Fitzhead conservation area, the west conservation area and the main village. So just an aerial site plan and location plan. So the property again is shown in red. We've got some of the key objectives live at the Biomes and Biomes Barn, which are converted into residential, and Biomes Farmhouse. The Knights Farm is on the opposite side of the road to the west of the site. All three properties are listed, grade two, and the traditional barns themselves are locally listed. So post site plan, since we've got an existing access to the southwest will be closed as part of this scheme. So that's going to be then infilled with traditional stone. Proposed access is to utilise an existing access in the northwest corner of the site, which is currently used for agricultural and domestic vehicles. Car parking is proposed for units 1 and 2 in the corner here, with the remainder for units 3 and 4 to the rear with visitor parking. Agricultural traffic will then be to the south, utilising an existing access to create that separation. Proposal also includes bin and cycle storage, which will be tucked away behind those stone walls, and the front stone wall is around 1.7. We'll see some photographs shortly. There's some of the elevations of the conversion. We can see on the right hand side the existing, and then proposal seeks to utilise predominantly existing openings with some new openings provided where necessary. And those essentially are to match the existing with brick lintels and concrete seals. Traditional materials are proposed to utilise either stone or slate roof. Again, looking at the other elevations, same again on these, you'll see new windows on the east elevation. You can see on the left-hand side the existing. Next slide just shows the floor plan. So essentially we're creating 2 2-bedrooms and 2 3-bedrooms. And this floor plan on the right there is just showing the first floor. So there's two two-story elements, they're units 2 and 3. It just shows there are two bin and cycle storage, so it just shows additional materials, so stone walls under a slate roof, and again it'd be tucked behind either the front stone wall or a wall that's along the middle of the courtyard. So moving into some of the site photographs. So proposal seeks to utilise, this is the main access now to serve the conversion itself. The Highway Authority have considered the access in light of the objections received and ultimately considered the proposal was acceptable. We can see then in terms of the general streetscape, so we've got the traditional barns behind and predominantly the courtyard, which is now being retained as a courtyard, is behind a 1.7 metre stone wall. And this just shows an existing access will be now closed off, and that's what's going to be a continuation of the stone wall. So these modern elements will also be demolished as part of the proposal. We're looking at the sort of rear south elevation of the site now. Existing barns will be partly demolished, and the boundary treatment will comprise either 1.2 metre stone boundary wall with fencing above, or post and rail fencing to the southeast corner and eastern boundary. Looking at some of the elevations of the barns themselves, so got the north elevation, so we can see stone built traditional buildings. The modern elements again will be demolished as part of the proposal. And just on this photograph, just showing those elements that will be removed. Just to show that field gate will be, again, the access that will be closed up and traditional stone wall infill. Just to try and find some clarity in terms of the buildings to demolish. So property and the buildings that's on the southwest corner there has been demolished already. And then we've got a wall, and these are the modern elements we've seen on the photographs. The large agricultural building to the east will be partly demolished, the sort of L shape, to create the parking for the occupants and visitor parking. and the existing buildings remain, will be used for agricultural storage and will be a condition. Quite a few of the elements will require those buildings that we've seen to be demolished to be removed to provide the cycle store or bin store, etc. But for absolute clarity, these recommended an additional condition to the recommendation to essentially, prior to first occupation, that those building structures identified on the site plan are removed and those materials removed. So in summary, the proposed scheme is considered to be well designed, securing the conservation and long-term viable use of these traditional buildings and farmstead. The removal of the agricultural buildings will enhance its appearance of the site and its setting within the West Fitzhead Conservation Area, and would not adversely affect the setting of the nearby listed buildings. There is no objection from the Highway Authority in respect of the access, and subject to undertaking the requirements of the farm management plan, consider there be no unreasonable loss of amenity for future residents. The recommendation, therefore, is one of approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The first speaker on this item, public speaker, is Nicola Burley. Thank you. You're having a busy afternoon. Do come up again. Anthony, would you remain? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, when you're ready, Nicola, your 3 minutes begin when you start speaking.
Thank you. Back again. Sections 66 and 72 of the Listed Buildings Act require you to pay special attention to preserving heritage assets. In this case, the conservation area and neighbouring listed buildings. Case law tells us that preserving means doing no harm. A legal opinion submitted to the Council in February of this year observed that the Conservation Officer had not identified nor discussed the detrimental effect of the change to residential use upon the conservation area and the setting of listed buildings. This omission continues in the evidence before you. It would be a breach of statutory duty that each of you as decision makers owe under sections 66 and 72 to determine the matter without addressing this omission. Vehicles would become a prominent feature on the site, parking in the former farmyard and in full view within the conservation area and setting of listed buildings. The Highway Authority advises that the proposed parking level is below the desired standard. This will result in parking off-site in the surrounding lanes. Elsewhere in Somerset at Babcarey, development that would cause cars to park in the setting of the Red Lion Inn, listed Grade 2, was dismissed at appeal last year on the grounds of harm to the significance of the listed building. There has been no assessment before you of the impact of domestic paraphernalia, activity, light or noise upon the character and appearance of the conservation area and the setting of listed buildings. You do not have before you a complete assessment of the impact of the proposal upon designated heritage assets. Vehicles parked on the lanes exacerbate highway safety. Advice from a chartered highway consultant challenges the Highway Authority's findings. The site exit is a blind junction onto a 60-mile-an-hour road, not a 30-mile-an-hour road as annotated on the applicant's site plan, which is before you. The visibility does not achieve the safety standard for a 30-mile-an-hour road, let alone a 60-mile-an-hour road. This is not by any standard a safe highway manoeuvre. Farming is to continue around the proposed 4 dwellings, including an average of 20 farm vehicle movements a day. Housing for cattle, in accordance with the submitted farm management plan, will be less than 20 metres off to the southeast. The Council's Environmental Health Officer advises of a legal responsibility to investigate complaints about noise or odours, and that farm activities in conflict with residential amenity may have to be curtailed. A live farm and new dwellings are not good close neighbours. National Planning Policy, Para 193, requires new development to only be permitted where it can be integrated effectively. You have before you a scheme that can physically create 4 houses in converted barns, but which cannot function as dwellings in accordance with planning law and policy. Domestic activity will harm the character and appearance of the conservation area, setting of listed buildings. There will not be a safe highway environment, and it will not integrate with the live farming activities around the site. You do not need to approve this scheme, which does not comply with policy. There are alternative options to saving these barns. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. David Matthews, please. And you'll be followed by Gillian Matthews. So.
Good afternoon. I have lived happily at neighbouring biomes, an extensive and important listed building, for 30 years. We welcome the sensitive restoration and appropriate use of the historic barns, but in a way that accords with planning policy and is safe for existing and new residents. We have serious concerns with the impact of the proposal upon highway safety. These concerns can be addressed by refusing permission for this scheme and working with the applicants to provide an alternative access to the site. When the southwest corner of Byams Wall onto Cat's Hash Road was demolished in the early 90s, further to an incident, the applicant, as the user of the farmyard and its access, requested that it be rebuilt at a lower height of 1.4 metres to improve turning visibility for his agricultural vehicles, a demonstration of the applicant's awareness of the highway visibility issues. Much is made of the extant use of this junction, but it is flawed. There is no comparison of visibility over Byams Wall between the raised seating height of typical farm vehicles and lower height cars when coming out of the driveway. There is no comparison between a Gator farm vehicle which has no bonnet and domestic vehicles which have long bonnets. There is no comparison between the current 2 and the proposed 3 vehicle widths, which the driveway will have to accommodate. Commercial vehicles visiting the new dwellings will also use this entrance. This unregulated access, the change of vehicle type, the inadequate splays, the intensification of vehicle movements, and a squeezed 3 vehicle width entrance change the nature of the junction, so there can be no comparison of past recorded incidents and the potential for future ones. The proposed access to the site will create an unnecessarily unsafe highway environment. Exiting in a vehicle onto Cat's Hash Road requires hearing as well as vision, but cars are getting quieter. Electric vehicles are heavier, slower to stop, and have greater impact at slower speeds. Recent research shows that they are twice as likely to hit pedestrians, and the latest Department of Transport statistics reveal there were 60% more fatalities on rural roads than urban roads in 2021. It is therefore essential that the safest access route into and out of the proposed development is chosen. We have submitted details that show how access from the driveway to the south of the yard would be safe and comply with highway safety recommendations. There is an alternative option that can conserve the farmyard, but in a safe manner, which is policy compliant. You can refuse this application on the grounds of a lack of highway safety, in the knowledge that the benefits of the proposal can be gained in a different way with a safe highway access. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Gillian Matthews, please. As you've probably worked out by now, your 3 minutes start when you begin speaking. The microphone is on, so make yourself comfortable. And when you start speaking, your 3 minutes start.
We have lived and restored Byams for 30 years. It is immediately adjacent to the proposed development. We would welcome a respectful development which conserves the historic farmyard. This proposal is not respectful, it is harmful. Detailed objections to these particular plans have been made. I urge you to reflect upon these before making a safe decision. The final plans before you continue to contain errors which need to be addressed. The highway speed limit is 60 miles an hour. The current lawful parking licence for Byams, a 6-bedroomed house, is for 4, not 3 vehicles as shown. 1 space is deliberately displaced to prevent obstruction to the farmyard car park entrance. The farm management scheme does not mention the extant agricultural vehicle movements in the middle entrance. The applicant's own daily average figure of 20 movements per day of large, noisy farm vehicles immediately next to residential property offends the agent of change as detailed in national planning policy. Mechanics of safe refuse collection are omitted. This scheme offers no adequate safe recreational space, particularly for children. It offends the setting in which it is proposed. The harm that it causes must clearly be offset by public benefit. The necessary balancing exercise has not yet been carried out on a properly informed basis, and this matter should be remitted until it has. We have submitted an alternative scheme which shows that the barns can be converted without harm to designated heritage assets and provides permanent safe highway environment. In 2000, Highways refused to support the restoration of Byams Barn, a listed Grade 2 medieval cottage, as they did not want to see any encouragement given, and I quote, to a development which would increase the demand for on-road parking. This was for just 2 additional parking vehicles in the access lane. 20 years later, the Highway Authority supports a proposal for a residential development which offers no drop-off or turning space, minimal visitor parking, and parking below the normally required standard. This will harm the conservation area through unregulated, dangerous on-road parking. You do not need to approve this scheme because a better conversion proposal using the locally preferred southern entrance lying beyond the conservation area is possible and policy compliant. The application has only narrowly considered buildings perspective. The issue of change of use has not robustly been assessed. Our freedom of information requests have demonstrated that due process has not been followed, and we will seek advice regarding a judicial review if this application is granted.
Thank you, Mr Matthews. Lindsay Hollands, please. I believe we're on Teams. Is that correct?
Yes, hi there. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Your
Hopefully
3
you can
minutes
hear what
start
I'm
when
saying.
we begin speaking.
Fantastic. My name is Lindsay Hollands and I have recently lived at Byams Barn for 7 years. As a previous resident, the plans for the redevelopment of these barns are of significant importance to me. I have first-hand experience of life at Byams and living on the doorstep of a working farm. It is a beautiful and peaceful place to live and was as idyllic as you can imagine, but with all the quirks and nuances of country life. The escaping cows, the monstrous farm machinery, the pungent scents and smells of bonfires, manure, and all manner of agriculture. But this was country living. I loved it, and most importantly, I felt safe. I could drive safely to my house, park right outside my doorstep, and was completely at ease in the privacy of my own home. At the time, as a single female, these amenities were paramount. Having considered the proposal, I have fears that there has been a complete lack of consideration for safety of current and future residents. The plans detail a completely unrealistic expectation for access, parking, and personal space. My fears not only pertain to the residents of Byams and Byams Barn, but future residents of the proposed properties. The space proposed for parking does not comply with regulation. It does not consider that in the countryside, by necessity, families may have multiple car users, and it hasn't accounted for multiple visitors either. Parking spaces were always at a premium, and with these plans still will be. The current plans for access to Byams and the new development lead straight on to an unpredictably fast stretch of highway, which is narrow, unlit, with poor visibility and subject to local flooding. It's a difficult road to navigate at the best of times. The heavy farm machinery, the 8+ cars from 4 properties, time-constricted service vehicles and delivery vans have the potential to cause chaos. It is just not safe. Not for families, not for road users, and particularly not for pets or children, where there is such minimal play space. The impact on personal space and feeling of safety is huge. Having lived so remotely, I always imagined what life might be like having a few more neighbours. And I do feel that additional housing at Knights Farm could be beneficial to the village and the surrounding area and would create a lovely sense of community in West Fitzhead. However, not how the plans currently stand, which create the potential for conflict, disharmony, and actual harm. I implore the Planning Committee to prioritise safety and well-being in their decision-making.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker on my list, please, is David Grubham. I believe the clerk is going to read out the statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Dear sirs, I give my full support to this application. We have lived in this part of Fitzhead for 45 years, living very close to these barns. We constantly use the road in question without incurring any problems. We feel that this quiet country road has good visibility,
People are extremely courteous and respectful when meeting other vehicles in these lanes. The barns look tired and need to be put to good use and can provide 4 lovely family homes, something urgently needed in this lovely rural area. There is ample off-road parking, unlike many other properties in the village. Hopefully this application can now move forward. Many thanks, Dave Grabham.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker on my list is Roger Mattox, please. Mr. Mattox. Come to the public speaking desk and the microphone is on, so when you're ready.
Thank you.
Your 3 minutes start when you begin speaking.
Right. I support the proposals for the following reasons. These lovely barns, if not in a conservation area, would have probably been granted Class Q or GDP O. Frequently drive these quiet lanes, often not seeing another vehicle. The visibility is good. The agricultural buildings are no longer suited for modern day use and are now showing signs of deterioration. As there's very little chance of new development, these lovely barns will provide desperately needed family homes. The proposal will enhance the quality of the buildings with their sensitive refurbishment, which has been achieved with the support of the Conservation Officer, and are consistent with NPPF paragraph 84C to reuse redundant buildings and enhance immediate settings rules. The plans have been changed several times. The farm lane has been regularly used over the years by agricultural vehicles, vans, etc., and by the neighbours without any problems. By keeping the farms and residential separate, it will not only reduce traffic, but make it safer for all. There is ample off-road parking there. With government changes to subsidies, small farms like this need to diversify in order to survive. Similar conversions have been completed in the village without any issues. I hope the committee will take this into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mattox. The next speaker on my list is the divisional member, Councillor Dave Mursell, please. Dave.
Ahead. I've seen the officer report. It covers my objection, which was sent 3 years ago in 2021. It has to be said that since then, this application has been revised several times. If you go back to what it looked like in 2021 and also to the application that preceded it, which was 2020, which was withdrawn, at that time, it showed no parking for the adjacent listed building. It showed
no idea. Sorry. No.
Fine for the chair doing it. Yeah.
My apologies, Dave. You might like to start again.
That's okay. I don't think I will take up 3 minutes, but okay. Yeah, so going back to the application in 2021 when it was first submitted, and as I say, there was a previous one as well, 2020, which was withdrawn. Now, at that time, it showed no parking being provided for the adjacent listed buildings of Byams. And it is important to understand and to note that parking had long been provided for Byams on the site of this application associated with Knights Farm. And that was very important for Byams there. As you gathered, there's narrow country roads around, and the only sensible location for parking is where it is, alongside Byams in the Knights Farm barns part of this site. Now, as things have moved along, the parking has been shown in the plans, but it was not there to start with. From what I've seen and what you picked up today, that parking not being provided has caused lots of concern, lots of difficulty. They've been revised now, but there is still concern. And as you've heard, there is also concern over access and heritage and other matters too. I do think it's important that this is heard, and it has been today, and that it is considered in the decision that you now take. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. My apologies for the interruption. The last speaker on this, public speaker on this is Mark Richards, please. Mr. Richards. And you're comfortable, if you push the right-hand button, the light will come on and your 3 minutes will start when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Mark Richards, partner and planning consultant at Greenslade Taylor Hunt. I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Pick's done an excellent job of summarising this application in his report and in person here today. We're grateful to Mr. Pick and also to the Council's Conservation Officer and Placemaking Specialist who have worked proactively with us to achieve what I'm sure members will agree is a scheme of sensitive and high quality design. Speaking in support of the application, I would like to raise the following key points. Hopefully I can have a little bit of leeway at the end. Thanks. So speaking in support of the application, I'd like to highlight the following key points. Firstly, these are beautiful, albeit rundown buildings in desperate need of a viable new use to give them a new lease of life. As required by DM2, a robust marketing exercise has confirmed that non-residential uses for the barns are not feasible. A sensitive residential conversion scheme is therefore justified in policy terms. The NPPF also gives explicit support to the residential conversion of redundant rural buildings where it would enhance their immediate setting. Secondly, recognising the importance of the site, the proposals have been designed in close consultation with planning officers, the conservation officer and placemaking specialists. Their valuable advice and feedback has helped to shape the proposals to what you see before you today, namely a development of high quality that safeguards the historic and agricultural character of the traditional barns. The application has also been assessed and found acceptable by all of the Council's technical consultees, including the Highway Authority, Conservation Officer and Somerset Ecological Services. There are no objections from those consultees. The proposals have also been designed to protect and enhance the amenity of the adjoining properties to the north. Indeed, measures including the relocation of farm activity and farm traffic away from the site entrance and yard, combined with the overall visual enhancement of the site, will all deliver substantial benefits for the enjoyment of those properties. The remaining agricultural activity will be limited to storage in the retained building to the east, with livestock housed in the barn to the southeast in the winter months. There'll be very few farm vehicle movements, all of which will utilise the access to the south of the site. These activities are sufficiently low-key and distant from the proposed dwellings to ensure no harm upon their residential amenity. Indeed, such arrangements are entirely typical in rural settings such as this. And finally, while much has been said about highway safety, I would remind members the proposal has been subject to robust assessment by the Highway Authority, who find the proposals to be acceptable. Bearing all this in mind, I hope that members will support the planning officer's carefully considered recommendation to grant planning permission for this development, which once complete will give these buildings a much needed new lease of life for the benefit of all in Fitzhead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillors.
I just confirm, it just came up. Is it right that did I hear correctly that all future agricultural vehicle movements will use the southern entrance and not come through the current entrance into Byams?
Yeah, that's correct.
Sorry, into Byams, into the, yeah, fine.
Okay, Andy Solly.
Thank you. Just like a little bit of clarity, please, on parking, because that's been brought up by quite a few people. Obviously, under the old Taunton Dean planning policy, there's a parking policy of so many cars based on bedrooms, like from a 1 bed, 2 bed, 3, 4 and 5 bed. What are the bedrooms and do they correspond to the amount of parking spaces that like a 4 bed should have? I can't remember, it's 3 or 4 parking spaces. Does this comply to our
parking standard policy? Thank you.
They've essentially provided two parking bays per unit, so plus 2 visitor bays. If we look at so essentially we can see here, so we've got 2 of the units have 2 bays.
So how many bedrooms are those as 1 and 2 then?
The which we've got
Because the yellow is 1 and
2 2s and 2 3s.
sorry,
2 2-bedroom and 2 3-bedroom.
right. So for 2 spaces for 2 bed, that would comply to policy.
There's the 3-bed one, well, one more, but essentially we've got additional room at the back there, so they've identified to mark them out, but there is sufficient area for overflow.
So you're saying this would be compliant to our parking policy?
They can certainly provide additional parking there.
Okay, thank you for that. And also, what is the building on the end where you've got plot 4 on the end? There's a building there at the top there. So what's that for? It's not within the. It's not
this one. I think they've just referred to it as domestic storage. So
that's going to be domestic storage for who?
For I think Knights Farm. So at the moment it's all under their ownership. They're going to build out these properties, and my understanding is they're going to be rented. So this isn't part of the conversion scheme at the moment.
It's still going to be used for the farm then?
Just for domestic storage.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
domestic storage. Sorry. Thank you for that. Thank you for the clarity. Thank you.
Andy Hadley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of clarification on parking again with biomes. I did hear somebody say, I'm not sure, that where the existing barn area is, that's where biomes used to park their cars.
Yeah, essentially along the access way at the moment, where I'm saying is a sort of a civil private agreement.
Right, so the parking that they've been given now is basically as close as to what it used to be before.
Yeah, got 3 months and 1 more. So it's essentially that this plan shows that if there is an agreement with the biomes, they can still provide that parking, but still work in terms of internal configuration for layout for proposed conversion scheme. I suppose it's just making the point clear that that still sits outside the planning system. So irrespective of this planning application, the owners of Knights Farm can still agree or not agree in terms of ability to park there. But if they do have that agreement, it does continue, then this plan shows that it can still continue to act.
So that hasn't actually been agreed yet.
It's a civil matter. So I think because it became contentious.
It's not a planning matter, it's a civil matter.
Yeah, the plan just demonstrates that if there is
So
an agreement.
there is space for them to have parking there.
Yeah.
And the second thing is just to confirm that there's been a lot said about the road and highway issues and the dangers of that road, but highways have not issued any objections.
No, I think so. The access at the moment is used obviously by domestic vehicles from the biomes and previously agricultural machinery. So the highways have taken the view that agricultural machinery will be now to the south. Therefore, I think they've taken there may be a small intensification of the access, but they've considered it, had no objection. In light of the objections, they've gone back to the Highway Authority just to reaffirm their view that they have no objection to proposal.
I'm going to bring Derek in. He's got a query on one of the site plans.
Can I just clarify this? It'll be a really stupid question with a very simple answer. The plan we seem to have on page 115, certainly on the PDF version I'm looking at here, has a different layout to that. So the parking for units 1 and 2 is in the same area, 4 cars are shown on there. The parking for units 3 and 4 is still 6 spaces, but in a different location slightly. And the plan in the papers shows in front of, just above the number 2, as it appears on the screen there, a grassed area, whereas that has a wall.
I think
what am I missing?
Just an error in terms of extracting the site plan to go with the committee item. So it got taken from the initial site plan, so that's the original one. So what you're seeing here is the current latest plan. So there was an update to the website to reflect the current plan, as you now see.
Thank you for that. Rosemary?
I think this might have been covered just. It's the question of the speed of the vehicles going past the entrance. I think highways have said this is all right, but we get this all the time around the county, that you get no speeding limits, and it's not suitable because of the width of the roads.
If you have an answer for that, Mr. Peck?
I think it's just, yeah, it is obviously a rural road. I suppose just from personal experience, the one element is that the current access to the south that's going to be used for agriculture, that's very much rural. So you are coming down the hill there. I think when you come to the properties themselves, you start getting a bit more of the sort of built up area, and it probably slows you down to some degree. But in terms of the speed limit versus highway access, then yes, Highway Authority have assessed and confirmed no objection.
Any other councillors wish to comment? Is there anything you'd like to pick up on, Mr. Peck?
Conservation, I was probably just going to pick up on a couple of points. I don't know if you've been given a photograph, streetscape.
Yes, a number of photographs were distributed in the last couple of days to all members of the committee. So we have all seen those photographs.
I suppose just in terms of the impact on the conservation, I just saw one of the photographs. I think it was just taken from a higher perspective. So I think it's a Google Street View extract if we're looking at the same one. Same picture as this one, essentially just taking it as there. So the photograph just shows the 1.7 metre wall. So essentially, in terms of domestic paraphernalia, you're not going to see the same sort of what the Google Street View would do, where it's higher up. So we've taken PD rights away for any new structures or buildings. And obviously, we're going to lose the modern elements. So the conservation definitely has assessed it on those statutory policy legislative tests, and essentially on balance, it's considered that we are going to retain, repair, restore those buildings, and the impact on the streetscape is going to be an enhancement because we're going to lose some of those modern elements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillors, we are at a point now where we've heard all the discussions and arguments. It's an application which has been written for approval. Andrew?
I'm happy to propose it, Chair.
Thank you. Propose that, thank you. And is there a seconder for that? Norman, thank you. And can I see those in favour of approving this application, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're going to be unanimous. Everyone. Yeah. Okay, we're going to have a very quick 8-minute break.
One quick question, sorry. In terms of the resolution, to include the condition as well? Recommended.
Approve conditions of the additional condition 21 that was part of your presentation.
Thank you.
So yes, that includes that definitely. We're going to take a 10-minute break. It will only be 10 minutes, so please be mindful of that. Agenda item 7, which is 49/20/0034. This is Reserve Matters application, and presenting officer is Paul Sherman. Good afternoon, Paul, and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. This application is the Reserve Matters following the grant of an outline permission for 71 dwellings on land north of Burgess Lane. Members will recall this application was originally presented to committee on the 1st of May, where the application was deferred to seek clarification in respect of the affordable housing, arrangements for SUDs and open space, and the management arrangements for communal car park and the allotments. I will go through the presentation fairly briefly, as you will have seen it before, and it should be noted that there's been no change to the application since it was presented to you previously. That is the application site outlined in red. To the west of the site is a previous development, and this proposal will tie into that previous development. That's the site again in red, north of Williscombe, north of Burgess Lane, and west of Heathstock Hill. And this is the proposed layout that you're being asked to consider. Mostly 2-storey, some single-storey, mix of property types. We have a hard landscaping plan because one of the reserve matters was landscaping. We have a soft landscaping plan as well, which for you now. Parking layout of note is a communal car park located in this area here to serve the properties on Burgess Lane. And an access and vehicle tracking document. Access was one of the original matters approved by the outline, but have been some minor tweaks to the access arrangement. And you'll recall you had some advice from the highway officer at the meeting last time that the highway authority is satisfied with the parking and the highway access arrangements. Here we have the house type plans. I tried to annotate with gold stars where the location of the affordable units are on this plan. And it should be noted we've had clarification from our housing enabling colleagues that they are happy with the location, design and size and specification of all of the affordable housing units. And in your report to this application, there's an update on the unit types, the tenure types, and what the applicant refers to as the additional affordable housing units, which are market housing units that they intend to sell to an affordable housing provider. So they will potentially be more affordable housing units, but they're not secured by this planning application. Here we have some street scenes. You can see the various property types. Another street scene, and I'll just run you through a selection of house types. Generally 2-storey, a mix of brick, render and stone, and fairly closely resemble the units on the earlier phases of development. It's an example of one of the flats over garages with a pass-through underneath and garages on the ground floor and a flat above. Example of a rendered property, some with attached garages. View of the application site, probably worth noting the change in levels on the application site. Burgess Lane to the right of shot. Another view of the application site looking down towards the earlier phase of development. Within the site looking back towards properties on Burgess Lane. And that's the site on the right-hand side of shot. Looking up towards the junction with East. And then that's a photo from a similar location looking back down towards the sites. So the key considerations relate to the design of the scheme, the layout and appearance of the dwellings and the landscaping. Officers are still satisfied that the design of the scheme is in keeping with the earlier phases and will respect the character of the area, and that the development provide a good mix of house types and that the layout is appropriate. As I said out in your report, our council's housing enabling team have confirmed they are satisfied with the housing, affordable housing proposed. The council's highway officers are satisfied with the scheme and do not object on highway safety or parking grounds. Matters in respect of SUDs and open space, where these are off-site, they are not a material consideration for this planning application. And you had some advice from that from the council's legal advisor at the last committee. And the car park within this application, the allotments and other communal areas of open space can be managed by a residence management company going forward. So the recommendation for this application is to approve, subject to the conditions set out in the previous committee reports and subject to the completion of a planning obligation to secure phosphate mitigation. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for that. Now, this is an odd one because it's come back and only the councillors that were present at the previous meeting are able to vote on this. And that is all of us in the room with the exception of Ross Henley. Ross can, of course, contribute to the debate, but is not able to vote because you weren't at the previous meeting. So you weren't there. That's right. Indeed not. So that's where we are. And the other comment I'll make is on this question of affordable housing. I know that the developer is in conversation, but they are policy compliant at the moment. And were there to be any additional properties sold to an RSL. That's entirely plausible, entirely commendable, but it's not something that we can condition, and it is not something that we can guarantee. So whilst it's a desirable outcome, it should not affect your judgment this afternoon. I just want to be very clear on that. Now, we've got 3 public speakers on this. The first one is Peter Hazelwood, please. Mr. Hazelwood, if you come to the public speaking desk, and when you're comfortable, the red light is on, so your 3 minutes starts when you start speaking. You'll be followed by Councillor David Mansell, and then Brett Spiller and Mr. Brown. Okay, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I speak on behalf of the 52 existing properties associated with the development that have already been pre-built, and they are the stakeholders of the Willermead Management Company. I also speak on behalf of the Residents Association that's recognised by the Town Council. Effectively, we don't object to this development at all. It was always going to be a known development, and it's not something we object to. The only aspect of this that we have exception to is the access that is being granted into the attenuation pond that is privately owned by the Willermead Management Company and by the residents that own a 50-second share in that. We are responsible for the management, we are responsible for the ownership. It doesn't rely on anybody else. I am fully aware that a deed of easement has been put forward. I have asked to meet with the planning to highlight our concerns and have been told that it's immaterial. But I would like to highlight that effectively the deed of easement that was signed to give right of access into the attenuation pond and the SUDs effectively means nothing. It was signed in 2020. That was 2 years after that the last property was sold. And when the last property was sold, all 52 shares became active in the Willermead Management Company. As a result, we don't believe that BDW, who were the original developers, and when they entered into agreement with the new developers in signing the deed of easement, had any right to do so. And we believe that now putting the ownership for the full management of the attenuation pond onto ourselves is incorrect. We believe that potentially there is the scope to share the responsibility, and we're not adverse. It was something we were expecting. But because this is now a new application in response to phase 1 and phase 2, this is completely separate. It's not tied to the conditions of the original. As a result, we would ask for your consideration of our needs, given that basically that we've got no other point of outlet. We have highlighted this to the existing developer that they had no right to enter into the agreement. They've acknowledged us, and we're waiting on their formal response and how they wish to rectify the situation. We have logged a complaint with the council on this basis, because part of the planning officer's report back to our councillor was the fact that there is an ongoing application, and whilst the previous application being considered by the council might have been negligent in not considering this and looking into it further at the time. It is now the responsibility effectively of yourselves in deliberating and coming to an agreement. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hazelwood. Councillor David Mansell. David.
Okay, I'm going to need to be quick. I only saw the case officer comments after the last committee meeting. They hadn't come to me before. I've got 4.5 points to make in 3 minutes. First one has just been covered, that this was in 3 phases, and there's shared assets across the 3 phases. But phases 1 and 2, we've just heard from the Residents Association, are less than half of the total households, but they're being required to pay for the shared assets. Now, however this has arisen, particularly the pond, play area and the open space, however this has arisen, whether it's council developers, it's not fair and should not have happened. And if the council hasn't picked it up, the developers should have done. And as you can see, it's going to cause the problems down the line. That's one. Next one, I do wish to comment on policies for zero or low carbon design. And this is really important. It is covered in Taunton Deane local plan. It's policy DM5. And as referred to in the documents you've got before, there's climate positive planning. That gives guidance on how to apply DM5. It needs to be read and looked at. It's page 17. There's a whole section on it from page 17 in climate positive planning. Pages 20 and 21 covers how it applies, should be applied to new building. So there is a policy there. Now, climate positive planning has come out since this application came in, although I notice it's put in the documents. But all it's doing is advising on current policy that was there before. So I do tell you, there is something on the energy aspects of design, and it's really important this council gets to grips with this. And I'm very disappointed to note what's been said in the report. For me, this causes the problem. And if we don't get it right today, we need to start making sure we get it right in future. So that's that. The half point is on electric vehicle charging, where a similar thing occurs, again covered in climate positive planning. And that is referring to Somerset Parking Strategy 2013 about requirement of electric vehicle charging. It should be done. You know, what's the difficulty in putting electric vehicle charging? Absolutely standard these days. Shouldn't be a difficulty. Need to do it. Two other things to cover. Oh my God. Right. Burgess Lane, the layout of this has changed completely from reserved to outline. It's swapped around due to the landscaping comment. Problems now with the access into off Burgess Lane from the housing. People will not do that reversing on their property. It's too small. That's a problem. And there's a big problem with displaced parking. 24 to 28 cars park along there. Photos show it during the day. During the evening, when people are home from work, I count whenever I go past. It's normally between 24 and 28 parked along there. Only 14 spaces have been provided for that. And the previous layout was completely different. Compare the original layout outline with the layout now today. It has changed. There was courtyard parking and there was not the private drains onto Burgess Lane. That is displacing parking. It's going to cause a big problem.
Really sorry, the buzzer was your 3 minutes.
Thank
you. Okay. The last two speakers are apparently sharing the 3 minute slot. Brett Spiller and Mr. Brown, please. I'm not sure if you're still planning on doing a double act. Are you still planning on doing a double act? Oh, fine. In that case, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. Chairman, members, I'll keep this concise. You have had a letter from me in advance of the meeting, and you've also had a very helpful update from Mr. Sherman. Clarification has been provided in relation to the quantum of affordable housing and the future management of the sustainable urban drainage lagoons. And just for the avoidance of doubt, I would reiterate that Lovell do believe that they do have a connection to the lagoons, and there has been no objection from the council's local lead flood officer either. However, as advised by your officers, these are distractions in terms of the issues. The application before you is Reserve Matters 1, and you're being asked to consider matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscape. The approval is on an allocated site, benefits from outline consent for 71 dwellings, allotments and associated infrastructure. The layout and scale respond very much to the contours of the site, with two-storey homes giving way to bungalows on the higher ground, as has been illustrated through the presentation. And there's a tighter urban grain exhibited in the southwest quadrant, which also progressively gives way to a looser feel along the northern settlement edge. The views along the new access road are framed, but deliberately left open to accentuate the connection to the surrounding rural landscape. The proposed layout will establish perimeter blocks, allowing for a positive street scene with strong building lines, and there's a cohesive mix of architectural details and high quality materials shown on the plans. These include a variety of porch designs, which give distinction to the individual sets of dwellings, gablets to break up the eaves, and as I've already mentioned, the materials which include brick, stone and render. These details serve to add visual interest and also help to fulfil the government's aim of creating attractive homes within beautiful spaces. The dwellings fronting Heathstock Hill and Burgess Lane enjoy pleasing ribbon spacing and establish an active frontage. You recall that Mr. Fellingham, Service Manager for Highways Development Management, previously explained how the proposal accords with best practice guidance on placemaking and also ensures that the public realm doesn't appear car dominated. A combination of on-plot parking and parking courts are employed, and as you previously heard, one of the parking courts will be dedicated to the use of existing residents to the south of Burgess Lane. It's positioned equidistant between the existing homes, which is intended to serve. So we've been quite deliberate in terms of where that's been placed. There will be a management company for the site, and they will be charged with the allocation of parking permits for that particular car park as well. As previously clarified by Mr. Evans, the council solicitor, the approval of reserve matters would contribute towards Somerset Council's housing land supply, delivering much needed market and affordable homes. The scheme allows for the early delivery of affordable homes and the housing enabling team are now particular homes as well. And for the reasons that I've set out, I commend the officer's report and recommendation to you and respectfully request that you approve the matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The buzzer was your 3 minutes, but I allowed a small tolerance.
Thank you.
Okay. Paul, was there anything you wanted to come back on?
Just a clarification on the layout. It's quite normal that layouts change between outline and reserve matters, and anything shown at outline would have been for indicative purposes only. It's this application that's dealing with layout.
Thank you. Martin, was there anything you wanted to pick up on?
Just in relation to the discussion to do with the attenuation pond and the management of that, as the officer said, those are civil commercial matters between the parties and not a consideration for you. That's our advice.
I'm going to start with Andy Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. You've just answered one of my questions. The other one, can you go back to the layout of the affordable housing? Because the query I had at the last meeting was that the policy is that affordable housing should be dispersed across the estate so that it mixes in. All that affordable housing is actually right at the southwest corner. That's not integrated into the estate, is it? That's all in one area. And that was the concern I had the first time, that the policy that we have is that affordable housing should be integrated into the estate so that it has no detrimental effect to the residents of the houses, so that they're all treated the same. So there's, so that does give me a little bit of concern that they're all concentrated into one area, and that could lead to some sort of I don't know. I'd have to have a think about that one. That's the concern I had last time, and that's basically confirmed my concerns. It wasn't necessarily the types of houses, because in the last application it stated what was being given, but it didn't say where they were, and that is a concern.
Yeah, thank you. It's just worth clarifying that in this instance, I think there's a registered provider who's happy with them and has inputted into the layout of the scheme in terms of where they are. Our housing enabling colleagues are happy. In terms of kind of the mix and pepper potting, it's always a balance between trying to deliver a scheme that's worked for the registered provider and having an aspiration of moving it around the rest of the site. It's probably worth pointing out, as was mentioned, this is part of a wider development that's on the left-hand side of that plan, which also will have pockets of affordable housing. So there are other pockets of affordable housing spread throughout the development. This isn't all the affordable housing across the wider site. So from our point of view, I think we're happy with how it is laid out.
Yeah, I will just come back on that slightly, is that actually what's the point in us having a housing policy if we're just going to say that they're happy with it, so therefore we should be.
Okay, Andy?
Thank you. One of the concerns we had last time was regarding the access to the properties along the road, because the original plan was to have access from behind the properties. Then this detailed, more reserved matters plan is changed at all. We had that as a concern last time, but it's not been addressed this time. You just said, oh, the the officer that came last time was happy with it. What he stated was that in development terms, you've got to have the houses fronting onto the road. Doesn't mean you actually have to access your property from that, because we've got development going in Norton, and the planners have said you've got to access from behind. So you're going to have a road into it, and the access to all the properties will be from behind. You're going to have people reversing on and off that road. And if you've got a young child, you know, in the morning, someone's busy going to go to work, not thinking, you know, puts the car in reverse and tries to get out quick. You know, like with children, they're all running all over the place. There could be an accident waiting to happen along there. I'm concerned that it's not being addressed. We brought it up last time, but it's not being looked at. I don't know if you can give us some more clarity why it hasn't been looked at, but the layout could be slightly tweaked so you get access from the back of the properties, not from the road.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. We have to deal with the layout that we have in front of us, and Highways have been consulted on and said they're happy with it from a highway policy, safety, capacity point of view, without any objection in highway safety terms. We just have to deal with this layout as it is. You had some advice last committee that the reasons why it was done in terms of active frontages and good highway design, fronting access onto that street, that wasn't one of the reasons for deferral. So that's why it's not addressed in the update report. So the kind of advice, the advice you
One of
received
the
was,
reasons why we deferred it was, I remember Derek talking about it at the meeting about not being happy about the access to the front. So I can't see why it was missed off.
I don't claim to be a precise historian when it comes to, I certainly recall there being a discussion about the parking along access and egress to driveways along Burgess Lane in the context of the parking on the other side of the road. My recollection is there were some remarks about the fact that when it was initially looked at, of course, the proposal was for the vehicle access to these houses not to be off Burgess Lane, but now they were. And my recollection was there was a sense that maybe the additional impact hadn't fully been considered, and I thought that was part of the reason for deferral. But I mean, it may be that I'm mistaken. I don't know.
so from my perspective, we took our reasons for deferral from the committee minutes that were approved at the subsequent committee, which listed those items out, so that wasn't there. Notwithstanding that, at that last committee, you had an explanation from the highway officers. That advice hasn't changed between then and now. The layout hasn't changed. Their advice remains that there's no highway safety objection to the scheme. They're happy with it from a highway design perspective.
Members will recall that Mr. Pone from the Highways Authority was here and expressed that view.
Yeah, he expressed a view that properties should be fronting onto the road. I agree that 100%. We're talking about the access. So you're saying the officer's now saying that he's happy that the access for those properties off Burgess Road is fine in terms of highway policy.
What I'm saying is, when questioned, Mr. Pone from the Highways said last time that whilst he might prefer a different access, there were no highways objections to access from the front.
Okay.
Caroline.
Just picking up on one of Councillor Mansell's points. So this development, you're not seriously saying there's no provision for electric charging points for cars? That can't be, surely. And surely there's something in there around renewable energy. A lot of the increasing numbers of the developments that are coming forward to us have kind of low to zero carbon element. And I'm like, well, if this one doesn't, why would we be taking it forward in the current context? There's not even like electric vehicle charging provision. I'm like, on what, what year, what decade are we in here? This is, 2024.
Yeah, so we're dealing with here a planning. The original outline application, so when the planning permission was granted, is a 2017 planning application. So that sets the standard for renewable energy and things like that. What we're solely dealing here with the layout, scale, appearance, and the landscaping of the site. So anything relating to principle relates back to the outline.
We go back to, we need a government that's actually going to ensure that the things we all think should be desirable in new house building and are put there, and they will have a big fight with the developers as to whether or not the developers can afford it. 'Cause of course, we all know that developers don't make any profits. Okay, colleagues, any other questions or comments? Okay, right, we have the application, and the application is to grant, subject to the conditions as laid out in the report. Can I see a proposer for that, please? Mind you, if you're going to go against the officer's recommendation, you need to have valid planning reasons. So can I have a proposer for that? Yeah, of course. I'll bring Alison in.
In relation to the point about electric vehicle charging points, I think it might be worth going back to the applicants to ask them whether they would accept a condition on that. As Paul's rightly pointed out, we can't insist on it at this stage, but there's no reason why they can't voluntarily provide it.
You mean now?
Well, I mean, if members were minded to approve it subject to that additional condition, we could go back to the applicants on that basis.
I'll bring Martin at this point.
No, I was just going to say.
Oh, sorry. So, yeah.
Just ask, look, Councillor Mansell stressed about DM5 policy. So that was in existence in 2017. And he believes it hasn't been sort of implemented on this planning application. Can we have a bit of guidance from the lawyer or Alison if that's the case? Thank you.
The climate positive planning, which kind of expanded on that guidance, wasn't enforced in 2017. So we didn't have the detailed advice that we now have. So in general terms, it's on the basis of what would have been appropriate at that time. So it's difficult. Basically.
It is difficult, but that is the position we are in. Andy Hadley.
Yeah, just a bit of clarification there, because as far as I see it, because it was an outline planning application, they're at will to change anything they like. As in what types of houses, where they're going to put the houses, what access they're going to have to the houses, anything else. But because it wasn't approved in 2017, we can no longer say, when you change all your things that you've never insisted on before, we can't ask for what's now required.
Welcome to the world of planning.
That's just
welcome to the world of planning, Andy. Andy.
Chair, are we allowed to, from what Alison, we can put a condition on that, we want them to look at doing the electrical charging point? Is that the way you could do it, Alison? Sorry.
Through you, Chair, if members wanted to run with that proposal, what you could do is to delegate to officers to grant planning permission subject to the applicant agreeing to that additional condition relating to vehicle charging points.
And come back, would we be too cheeky to say also to re-look at DM5 to bring it up to date?
I don't believe you can go retrospectively in that. We are stuck with the decisions that were made in 17 under the rules that are there in 17. And I don't like it any more than anybody else does, but welcome to the world of planning.
So this planning committee has no strength.
It wasn't there when the original was drawn up. So we are at a point where we can, if you can find some valid planning reasons to reject it, you can do that if that is your wish, and you have planning reasons to do so. Or we can go with the suggestion that we delegate this to officers to seek agreement of the applicant regarding the EV provisions, so charging provisions, and subject to that it can be approved. Or you need some planning reasons why you are rejecting it. Yeah, please, Derek.
maybe I'm being far too pragmatic here and trying to reach a conclusion, but given that we have people in the room who are relevant to this application, is it permissible for us to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes and see if we can secure agreement to EV charging points? Or is that, no, is that a no?
I would advise against that, Chair, to be honest. I think it's a bit, put a developer on the spot.
Okay, I'll get back in my box.
Most pragmatic suggestion we've got currently, I believe, is that we are prepared to grant this subject to the officers being able to agree with the applicant a further condition regarding EV charging points. Norman.
Being pragmatic about it, it's the best of the deal that you're going to get. And I think there's an advantage to the developer to have EV points on as a selling point nowadays anyway. I would hope that means we're pushing against an open door. So that being the case, this is the trouble with old applications that now come forward with different regs and all the rest of it. Don't like it. There's lots of things we'd like to alter, but practically we're hidebound. So with that in mind, with the recommendation to go back for an EV point in the hands of the officer, I'll propose it.
Thank you, Norman. I will point out that if there is no agreement, then there is no planning permission. So there is that fallback. So that's been proposed by Councillor Cavell. Can I see a seconder, please? Yeah, Derek, thank you. Those in favour of that proposal, please. 5. And those against? And none against, any abstentions? 1, 2, 3 abstentions. 3 abstentions, thank you. Okay. Okay. Right, we're going to move on now to agenda item 8. Thank you, Paul. Welcome, Denise. Item 8 on our agenda is 06/24/0009. This is land to the east of Dean Road in Bishop's Lydiard. Denise, good afternoon and welcome. Denise is ready now, Andy. We've got a lot to do this afternoon. Right, good afternoon. Agenda item 8 on your papers, 06/24/0009. Presenting Officer Denise, good afternoon to Denise and welcome. And this is the erection of an agricultural storage building on land east of Dean Road in Bishop's Lydeard. It's a resubmission, it's retention of part works already undertaken as amended. Denise, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you very much. Sorry about the IT issues. So as we can see, this is an application for the retention of an agricultural building on the same site as a previously demolished building. Here we can see the development site. Hopefully that works. And to confirm that the previous barn did have consent for conversion to dwelling under Class Q. However, that consent related to the conversion works only. Therefore, once demolished, there was no planning consent for dwelling on this site. The aerial view shows the development site and the existing development on the opposite side of the highway, and members will have seen in the site history that there were two previous planning applications to relocate the Class Q consented dwelling to the other side of the highway. Both of those were refused. So to confirm, the measurements of the barn are approximately the same as the one that was demolished. These were checked on site by myself and a colleague. The barn has been on site for a number of years, not the one we're seeing now, but the previous one. So there is no objection to a replacement dwelling in terms of visual impact. And to confirm, it is the existing access that would be used. I've put the measurements up on screen and you can see there are slight discrepancies between the two. However, there were scaffolding up when we measured, so I don't think really there's any real difference. The height is exactly the same. So here we have the proposed barn, the retention of. The design and materials are considered appropriate for an agricultural storage barn. And here we can see the floor plan. Now, the floor plan is covered by a specific condition requiring the removal of the partitions and pipework. This is condition 5. And the covering letter submitted with the application confirms the use for the agricultural storage purposes associated with arable farming. So to be clear, no livestock would be housed in the barn. So here we can see the partially constructed barn. You might see something that looks a bit like a window frame, but this would all be timber cladding. And members will note the scaffolding, which obviously impeded with the measurements. At the site visit, we could still see the pipework and the partitions. They were still in situ. However, as previously stated, a condition is proposed to secure their removal. So the Class Q was consented in February 2021, and we can see the barn as it was. We did have a structural survey submitted at that time to say that the barn was structurally sound. And in 2022, we had the first of the planning applications to relocate the consented Class Q on the opposite side of the road, and we did include an informative on that refusal to say that we considered that it was no longer possible to do the conversion works previously consented, and there's approximately 16 months between those two decisions. The recommendation today is to approve, as it is considered the development accords with policy DM2.4A, which relates to non-residential agricultural buildings. We consider it to be commensurate with the role and function of Tatton Farm, a holding of 110 acres or 44.5 hectares. Just to highlight some conditions of particular relevance, condition 4, that it's an agricultural storage building in relation to the management and working of the surrounding farm. Condition 5 would be for the pipework and internal partitions to be removed. And condition 6 removes permitted development rights from the structure. So do please accept my apologies, because on page 206 of the report, we have a blank first condition. That was entirely human error. So there are 6 conditions proposed as highlighted in the bullet points above and the usual informative. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you very much. We've got 2 speakers on this. The first is Georgie Ling, which I believe is a statement to be read out. Is that right, Leila? Yeah, okay.
Chair, can I just mention, I have had a very long statement, so I will set the timer as if they was in here. It's very long, so I will try my best. I have been advised that the Planning Committee should not be making any planning decisions regarding this application until the police investigation has been concluded. The new building, what has been built, is evidence of a structure built without permission in place of the old barn that was torn down and which I am alleging destroyed bat roosts, owl and migrating bird nests. This destruction of which is also evidence in SC's own ecology reports relating to planning applications submitted for the old barn which was destroyed because the applicant wanted to convert it into a dwelling. That application was turned down by the planning office primarily because the building had fallen into a dilapidated state and was deemed no longer viable to convert to a dwelling. This is relevant because the new building, which has been built without prior planning permission, has been done so it is first to get planning approval as an agricultural building, then a new application will be submitted to convert into a dwelling later. The planning office is fully aware of this as they have discussed it with the applicant and told them that they had to remove features which were installed when it was erected that made it habitable. If the planning office acts to approve this application, they will effectively be acting to facilitate the destruction of bat roost, owl habitat and migrating bird habitat, namely swallows, as evidence the SC's own ecology reports relating to the refused planning application for the previous barn. I remind the Planning Committee that the Planning Ombudsman found in my favour for another application on Oakdean by the same applicant, stating that the application should never have been approved by the Planning Office because the applicant had destroyed bat roost in ripping out the loft space to add new dormers. The Ombudsman agreed new dormers had been overlooked in the decision-making process, also that in improving the application, the Planning Office had acted to facilitate bat roost destruction. The police agreed with this view about the Planning Office facilitating habitat destruction, which contravened several laws on bat and habitat destruction, but because the evidence of the Ombudsman statement had not been completed, the police chose to let the applicant off with a warning that he must proceed with caution in future regarding any other buildings he was planning to convert. This application is one of those future buildings, but the applicant has once again ignored the police warning and destroyed the old barn to create the new structure, which is subject to this application. Does the Planning Office want to be associated with facilitating another bat roost destruction by this applicant and contravene the Ombudsman advice previously given that they were culpable and negligent the first time? I remind the committee that the Planning Ombudsman and Rebecca Powell, MP, have both stated previously that the Planning Office's role is not just to approve or deny applications based on general planning matters. It also has a duty to consider and act to uphold the law.
Okay, thank you. The second speaker on this is Simon Collier, the agent. Mr. Collier. When you're ready, you know the form. Sit yourself down, get comfortable, push the right hand button, and your 3 minutes start when you start speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I am Simon Collier of Collier Planning, and I am speaking on behalf of the applicants. There has been an agricultural building on the site of the same footprint and dimensions as the building to which this application relates for decades. Online historical images which have been submitted with the planning application demonstrate this. Like me, many of you will also know this anyway from driving past the site over the years. The field within which the building is located is part of Tatton Farm, which extends to 110 acres. Prior approval under Class Q of the General Permitted Development Order was granted by the Council in 2021 for the change of use of the building from an agricultural building to a dwelling. However, the works that were subsequently undertaken in good faith with the intention of implementing this change of use went beyond what was permissible under permitted development. The applicants now understand this And so this application simply seeks permission for the building that now exists on the site to be retained as an agricultural storage building associated with the ongoing agricultural use of the large field within which the building is located. Such a proposal is supported by policy DM2, being for an agricultural building commensurate with the role and function of the agricultural unit, near a public road and existing services, and of a scale, design and layout compatible with the rural character of the area. The building is modest in size and commensurate with the role and function of the arable agricultural unit of Tatton Farm. The building is of a scale, design and layout compatible with the rural character of the area, and as I have already said, is of the same footprint and dimensions as the building which has existed on the site and so been a part of the established rural character of the area for decades. Request your support for the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. Colleagues, comments, questions? Andrew.
If this is used for the next 10 years as an agricultural storage building, can it then gain Class Q status? I believe it has to be 10 years in occupation. If Martin could sort of give us some information.
We'll ask
We'll ask Denise.
the case officer, but I think removal of PD rights will stop that.
Yes, it's proposed to remove permitted development rights, so any changes will require a full planning application and proper consideration.
So is this classified as open countryside then? This area is open countryside, so you'd have to put, if you put a planning application, it'll come under, it's not within a settlement boundary, so it'll have to be looking on its merit in that sense.
Well, at the moment, yes, it's policy DM2.
Denise, thank you.
Colleagues, any other queries, questions? Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, looking at it as it is, I don't think we've got any other option but to actually approve this. Although I do find it fully strange that you need underfloor heating to keep your hay dry and hidden windows just in case you want to get it out the window. But the fact that they are being planted, sorry, I'm laughing at this. The fact they're being planned to take out, I think is a good move. So on that basis, I'm happy to propose.
Okay, thank you for that, Andy. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Norman. Okay, those in favour of the proposal? That's unanimous, thank you. Okay, excellent. We're going to move on to item 9, which is 14/23/0007, which is land at Langalla Manor Farm, North End, Crete, St Michael. Planning officer would have been Andrew Gunn, who's not available today, so we're back to Paul Shepherd. Paul, good afternoon and welcome again.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an outline application with all matters reserved except access, layout, scale, and for the demolition of the farm buildings and the renovation and alterations of the listed farmhouse for the erection of 33 dwellings and associated works. The application site located in red, items to note are the existing large farm buildings and the farmhouse, which is grade 2 listed. As I said, matters for consideration are layout, scale and access. The existing access is proposed to be reused for this development, and that's from North End Road. You can see the layout of the proposed units. The listed farmhouse is here. And it's also proposed to rebuild one of the barns in this location here, which I'll come back to in a little while. That is the layout of the site. Will be approved. It includes a small number of small cul-de-sacs with allocated parking spaces, garages and carports, and a range of dwelling sizes and styles. We have some block plans here. This just shows the internal turning arrangements for vehicles within the site, so that it shows that all vehicles will be able to access and egress onto North End Road in forward gear. This is the landscape plan. Landscaping is one of the reserve matters, but we have a landscaping plan as indicative, along with a street scene and some additional tree planting that can be provided on the highway boundary. This is the listed building, which is proposed to be refurbished and returned to residential use, which will include the erection of a rear extension. Our conservation officers have looked at the proposal and they're happy with the scale of the extension to the listed building and support it being brought back into use, because at the moment it's in a fairly poor state of repair. Take you through some of the house types. So scale is a matter for consideration, design is not, but these are indicative house types. Just skip past that, is an indicative elevation of what they call the barn replacement. So that's a replacement for one of the barns on site adjacent to the listed building. It will be a dwelling, but it's designed to look like a replacement barn. And some of the single-storey properties that can be found on the site. An indicative floor plan. So scale is considered, but again, detail and design is not. Take you through some photos of the site. That is the existing site entrance from North End Road. That's the site looking west towards Monkton, Heathfield and Taunton. A west section of the site. And these are some of the more modern barn buildings which are proposed to be demolished, all currently unused. That is the Grade 2 listed farmhouse. This is the barn that's proposed to be replaced. The more of the farm buildings, showing the listed building in the background. You can see from these photos, some of the buildings on site are very large. That's a couple of photos we have now of the farmhouse, which is proposed to be repaired and refurbished along with a small extension. So the principal planning considerations for you to consider tonight are principle of development. So the site is partly inside the developed boundary, the urban area of Taunton, but it's also partly within a green wedge. And the impact on the character of the area and the setting of Langalla, which is the listed farm, and the setting on and works to the listed building. Officers' view is that while the development will result in some introduction of residential development into the green wedge, much of this area is already occupied by agricultural buildings and hard surfacing. Officers consider while there would be some conflict with green wedge policy, this is outweighed in this instance by the benefits deriving from the restoration and reuse of the listed building and the provision of market and affordable housing on site. It's worth noting that there is policy compliant affordable housing provided as part of this application. Council's highways officers have raised no objection to the proposed access or the impact on highway safety or capacity, and officers consider that the layout and scale, which are the matters we're being asked to consider, are acceptable. And for these reasons, they've recommended that the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and completion of a planning obligation. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one public speaker on this, and it's the agent, it's Simon Collier again. You're having a busy afternoon, Simon.
Thank you again, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant again. In February 2021, members may recall that part of the application site was damaged from a major fire which destroyed some of the former farm buildings. The listed farmhouse has been vacant for many years, during which time it has been subject to persistent vandalism and is in need of significant repair and renovation. The submission of the planning application in February of last year followed a pre-application submission and positive advice from the council, which indicated that a planning application for the development proposed would be welcome. Indeed, the council's then Heritage at Risk officer, Joe O'Hara, had been working closely with us regarding the proposals and was actively encouraging an application to be made because the Grade 2 listed farmhouse is on the council's building at risk register due to it being vacant and the long-running problems arising from local vandalism. The proposals would involve the demolition of existing modern farm buildings, the renovation of and alterations to the listed farmhouse, and a residential development of 33 dwellings, including a policy-compliant level of affordable housing, biodiversity net gain, and a specific phosphates offsetting scheme, ensuring that the proposals are deliverable. Most of the site is within the settlement boundary of Taunton, and the small area which isn't forms part of the same farmyard complex of buildings and area of Hart Standing, and so is physically and visibly more closely related to the land which is within the settlement boundary than the adjoining land which is outside of it. The settlement boundary was actually drawn so long ago that it was before the farm buildings on the eastern part of the site were erected. The proposals would secure the renovation of the Grade 2 listed farmhouse and so would deliver substantial heritage benefits in a manner which the council's heritage officers have advised will not cause any significant harm to its setting. The only difference between the scheme assessed in the submitted heritage statement and the scheme before you relates to the proposals on the eastern part of the site, which is the furthest away from the listed farmhouse and has no additional impact on it. There are no objections to the application from any statutory consultees. No significant amendments to the proposals have had to be made to the application since it was submitted in February of last year, but for various reasons which have been entirely out of the applicant's control, it is now 15 months later and a decision on the application is still awaited. Meanwhile, the listed farmhouse continues to be regularly attacked by local vandals, including this last weekend, despite the applicant's best efforts to protect it and keep it secure. Your support for the officer recommendation would therefore be very welcome so that the proposals can finally move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. Colleagues, questions? Norman.
I think it's worth, sorry about that. I think it's worth bearing in mind that this site is between two proposed developments. The Monkton Heathfield 2 site, the other side of the North Road, and the south of Langalla Farm development that runs down to Hyde Lane. Part of the overall strategic plan of development out here not out here, sorry, out at Monkton Heathfield, was that there would be a green necklace to the north, which is part of the link walkway, etc., for health and well-being and protection of further work going out into open countryside, but to provide walkways all the way through, which will bring you down almost to Warford Park, where you'll cross over the road, and then you'll come through green walkways there, back down the motorway, and then there's a block, because you either have to come out of the small Langalla Lane, or you have to come out of a footpath that, because of the new bridge over the motorway, it steps up and steps down having crossed the road. And then you go on, if you can get through this development, into the walkway, which will take you down alongside the southern side of the Langalla, south of Langalla development. So I hope I've painted the picture, because what I'm going to suggest is that there should be a good pedestrian access through this site, so that you can come out of Langalla Lane on the level, and then you will make it a disability compliant walkway, which is, it can be the rest of the way, right the way round the 4,500 houses of Monkton Heathfield. So we need some way of getting through this site, not to be blocked off with parking bays, etc., into the greenery, and then link a proposed link for the future into that south of Langalla development. I think if they're going into the green wedge, there should be some quid pro quo, and they should provide some benefit to that future green wedge walk all the way through. So that's my proposal, Mr. Chairman, that be written into this planning application.
We're looking at the layout today,
Yeah.
so
If we are tied completely to the layout today and we cannot propose an alteration to it, then I would respectfully ask that it goes back for them to look at it again and come back with that suggestion.
thank you, Norman.
Just to be clear, and the officer, I think, mentioned it. So this is an outline planning application with all matters reserved except for access, layout and scale. So access, layout and scale are being determined today.
Yeah.
In which case, can I put the note in that can it be considered under access to provide?
Yeah, so access is a matter of detail, which we're being asked to consider at the moment. If you can hopefully see that plan on there. Maybe if I go up to a better one.
Well,
So let me just make sure I understand right. Is it the route through this way you're talking about? Yeah, and yeah, and then to go south. Yeah, so if we look at this plan, on the bottom of that screen, there are, the applicant owns all the land to the south, which is blue line. So it does show indicative points of access across and south.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, whichever is considered the best access to that future development south of Langella, right? And if, that can be tied in, that would be a great advantage. Otherwise, it could kill off what is a major benefit.
Yeah, I think what I can say is the layout that we have here wouldn't preclude providing access through this side to the land to the south.
As the officer said, Chair, the layout, if that's approved today, that does not include access to the south. That's the plan you're being asked to approve today as part of the application and the officer's recommendation.
Okay, so that can be put forward by the officers. Okay, Andrew.
Could I ask this anyway? Because of the last application. Basically because of the issues with the last application, can we have a condition written in that when the reserve matters come back, they comply with the planning policies at the time that the reserve matters come back?
Interesting question, but I think the answer is no. I think that would have to be a national planning policy framework issue. I understand entirely the sentiments, but I'm not sure that we can use planning conditions because a planning condition has to be necessary to make the application in front of you acceptable. So trying to future-proof it through conditions is quite tricky. I would probably impossible.
To do that would actually encourage the developer to bring the development forward a lot quicker because he gets the policies that he's actually designed it around. And if we get somebody in 5 years' time, we get to what we've already agreed anyway.
Okay, so if we go ahead and approve the plan, we do have access to the south. So those items, the discussion that Norman's requested, which makes great sense because the green necklace is a really, really important and valuable part of the local plan in that area. It provides a green necklace around the town, and it's hugely important. And we have that condition there, and we have access to the south with this application. So I'm content with that. Andrew.
I was just going to clarify. I know there is the possibility of an access at the south there created. Have the developers said that we can use it, or can it be made a condition that this can be agreed as long as access can be delivered?
That would be to the field, Mr. Chairman, that is left there. What I'm asking for is a public right of way access to be established that will link up with the existing walk that is already there, but can only be accessed by going up and down over the road.
Yeah, so the current application doesn't provide for a public right of way through the site. There's different tests you have to go through to establish a public right of way. If that's something that the committee require in order to approve it, that's something we can look at after this meeting, but it's not secured. It's not by the obligation that we're currently drafting.
Well, that's why I was asking about access, because this needs to be a public access and it needs to be there as part of our long-term strategic design to make it disabled compliant as well.
The green necklace is a hugely important part of the plan. It creates that necklace around the whole of the town, and I would be very unhappy if we put ourselves in a position where we were stopping that happening, having spent the last 20 years of my life trying to make sure it happens. I know, Norman. I know only 20, Norman. I know, but nevertheless, it's a hugely important part of the regeneration around Taunton. I don't want to see that missed by an error on our part.
So, go back to what I said previously, which is this doesn't deliver that access, but it doesn't preclude it being provided in the future. So I'm not sure whether it's if the council require, if the committee require that to be an obligation in the Section 106 agreement. It could be a resolution of the committee that, as the other things to be set out in the Section 106 agreement, could be included as an obligation.
I'll propose it as a resolution.
I'll happily second that, Norman. Yeah. Okay, so, yeah.
So, Chair, there's been a proposal to accept the officer recommendation, but with an additional planning obligation to secure the footpath through the site, as discussed.
Indeed. Andrew, were you seconding that? Oh, yep. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies, Martin, but a footpath through the site that will join up with the existing.
But it needs to link with the existing, because the whole point is to maintain that green necklace around. Okay. Right. That's been proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour of that?
Chair, could I just have clarity? We talked about, Norman, a footpath. Are we talking about footpath stroke cycle path? Is it for for connectivity? Because we're talking about, we could exclude cyclists from coming on it?
It will join back eventually with the canal towpath further down. So there is a logic to with what you're proposing.
Can we add that, Norman, that it's a footpath stroke cycle path?
Suitable path to link with all the rest of it, otherwise the whole green necklace and the connection with the canal towpath falls away, and that's not something that we're prepared to see.
So, LN 120 compliant?
Yeah.
So, Chair, if the proposer and seconder are happy, we can add the wording footpath stroke cycle path.
Yeah.
To link in with the existing
plans. With that, are the proposal and second happy with that? Linked in with the proposed and with the existing and proposed plans, future plans, the connectivity? Yeah, okay. It's been proposed and seconded. Can I see those in favour, please? Excellent, that's unanimous. That's excellent, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, item 10 on our agenda is 19/23/0007, which is land to the rear of Farmers Green House, Julie Road, Hatch Beecham, and the planning officer is Mike Hicks. Good afternoon, Mike, and welcome. And this is here because the applicant we use the applicant in his professional capacity quite often with the planning department. That's why it's here. Otherwise, it would have been a delegated decision. So, Mike, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the change of use of part of a garden with construction of a vehicular access and driveway for access to the land at the rear of Palmer's Greenhouse. Here is the... Pardon? Let's try again. Sorry about that. So here is the site outlined in red with this portion down here. This is the proposed existing garden to be changed to an access, and that access contains an access track and vehicular access onto Stewley Road here. This is the land that it's accessing to the rear of Palmer's Greenhouse, and Palmer's Greenhouse is located here. There is reference in the report to one of the neighbour comments, which makes reference to an existing access, which, just for reference, is located here at the top end of the paddock. Here is the site location plan with the application area outlined in red, and then the adjoining land outlined in blue. This is showing the access. We got vehicle tracking to be put on the plan. So this shows a typical large vehicle with a trailer, which is the typical kind of vehicle you would have accessing an equestrian paddock such as this. So this was to demonstrate that the access can acceptably contain the vehicles undertaking all of the manoeuvres in and out in both directions. So just here, this is just an example of coming in from the other direction into the site. Here are some photos. So this is the area under the application is this bit of land here, which has had the hedgerow, I think, where there's a gap in the hedgerow. This property here. This is Norgall's Nook, which you'll see reference to that property, which is opposite the proposed access. There's reference to that property in the report. And then this is looking in the other direction. So you can see the gap here in the hedge. That's where the access would be. Norgall's Nook is just off this photo, and this is looking in the other direction towards Hatch Beecham Village. And then this, just to give you an idea of the visibility splay to the right-hand side as you would be pulling out of the proposed access as the splay. And this is the paddock to the rear. This is about the location where the proposed access would come into the paddock. And there are some properties which reference is made to in the neighbour representations, and those are the properties which back onto the paddock there. You'll also note that there is a committee update on this for changes to one of the conditions relating to consolidated surface for the access. So that is condition 5 to be amended as per the update sheet, and the approved plan numbers to be changed in condition 2. So subject to, well, for the reasons given in the report, the recommendation is to approve, subject to that change to condition 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shelton, your time is now, sir. You like to come up? Yeah, if you'd like to come up to the public speaker. Yes, Michael, turn the microphone on for you. And you turn it on, Mike, please. Thank you. And your 3 minutes start when you start speaking, Mr. Shelton. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, dear councillors. The only reason my application is being considered by committee is because my agent has a contract with Somerset Planning Department. And the reason for asking for separate access to the stables is so we can sell the house, which is too big for us, and yet still maintain our horses. New entrance gives us easy access to maintain 3 or 4 horses over the winter period and allow us to drive a car and horse trailer into the facility. There are only 3 stables and a hay barn, so the facility can be used as it has done for the last 50 years. The size of a new access allows us the maintenance of mature trees, shrubs and varied wildlife for the entrances in to continue. End.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Just in a minute.
Okay, fair enough. Colleagues, questions, queries? Andrew?
Just looking at the indicative locate the plan, is that little building going to be taken down that's sort of going halfway across the access?
Sorry, can you say that again? I was just.
There's a little building that is halfway across the access. Is that going to be taken down? Or is that you can go around it? A little building there on the plan. Yes, you go back. See the little building there.
Yeah.
So what is that? Is it staying going?
It's staying. Yeah.
That's. Yeah, that is a manure heap, is it?
Yeah. The manure heap at the moment.
Yeah.
So to the left, there's 2 sheds which aren't being touched, which can never be used. So 2 sheds.
Right.
If we go back to this, so I think it's the
Where
sort
your
of
finger is,
the area
two
to the left.
sheds,
Yeah,
yeah.
sort of just
They
here.
never get used, but they're not coming down. That's
Because it
it.
shows on the next plan.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. I'll
Okay, the next
leave
plan.
it to the officer if you don't mind.
What's the next plan?
Oh, the next plan. Right.
No, where is it?
This one.
There, you see it there?
Yeah.
That's what we can see, the little tiny square on top of where you've got the
Yeah,
access.
so they stay.
Yeah, okay.
They're not coming down.
So why do you need the access so wide if that's?
It's not wide. I don't think it's wide, is it?
And this is not a free for all.
So it's yeah, so it's a 5 metre wide access, which is what was considered an appropriate width. One of the reasons it is quite wide is to allow a sufficient radius for the vehicles turning in, so a vehicle with a trailer, because the main highway is fairly narrow at this point. It does require a slightly wider track so you can do the tracking in an appropriate way without having to back up and to struggle to make the turn.
Thank you for answering. And Chair, I'm quite happy to propose and happy to listen to what everybody else has got to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm one of the ward councillors and just having a look at this and I've noticed that there were some questions raised by Hatch Beach and Parish Council and also some comments and representations made by members of the public, which seem to have been dealt. We've had Andy ask similar questions about the access being so wide, and that's been picked up by the officers and answered by the applicant. And some of the other ones which really aren't relevant to this application. So with that in mind and hearing the answers to the officers, because I wanted some answers on those representations, I'm minded to support as well.
You seconding that, right? Thank you, Ross. Okay, Andy, do you have your hand up? Sorry, I missed you.
Right. No, I don't have an awful lot to say about this. I think it's pretty normal, to be quite honest, to be able to access the field, as long as it does stay in a equestrian field. The only other question I have got, because I did notice in the ecology report, they said no vegetation to be removed within the nesting season. And I noticed a lot of the hedgerow has now been removed, and I hope it wasn't removed during the nesting season.
I believe it wasn't removed in the, from what I recall, I don't think it was removed in the nesting season. That's correct from what I understand.
Okay, so we've had a proposer and a seconder. Can I see those in favour of the application, please? 7. And those against? And any abstentions? No. Time recording.
Sorry, Chair, it was seven in favour.
My apologies, Rosemary. I need my Weetabix. Okay. Okay. Well, that concludes the business end of our meeting for today. I'm happy to say we move on now to agenda item 12, which is the appeal decisions. Now, I'm going to bring Sarah Stevens, our officer, in to discuss this, but we are going to discuss the appeals. We're not going to go into any great detail on any of them. This is an information item only, so I'm going to hand over to Sarah now. Sarah?
Thank you very much, Chair. There are 3 decision letters, but actually 4 appeals. The enforcement appeal, which I will cover last, is actually 2 duplicate appeals, hence why it's actually 4, but there are 3, and I will just summarise briefly the key points that the inspector raised. There was also 1 application for costs in relation to the enforcement appeal, which I will also cover. So the first site is the Anchors Drop, Blue Anchor, a site which I think you're well familiar with, given that you had a number of applications before you. The appeal was in relation to the installation of solar panels on the main building and on the static caravans, along with the ground-mounted solar panels in the northwestern garden area. And this was a committee decision and an overturn or officer recommendation. And the inspector allowed the appeal. The main issue was whether the site was suitable for the appeal scheme, having regard to its location within a coastal change management area and the character and appearance of the area. The inspector found that proposed panels would help the business on the site operate more efficiently in terms of energy, and that the panels could not be located elsewhere. The proposal will provide wider sustainability benefits as recognised in the NPPF. The panels would have a limited lifespan and can be required to be removed once they cease to generate electricity. Consequently, the inspector held the proposal is a temporary tourism-related development and accorded with local plan policies. The inspector found there would be modest harm to the character and appearance of the area, but this was outweighed by the benefits of the proposal that included supporting transition to low carbon and the cutting of greenhouse gas emissions. In this particular appeal, there was no application for costs. That one next.
We do have, unusually for us, a public speaker on one of these items. It's the next one that Sarah Stevens is going to cover. So I'm going to ask Mr. Dibble if he'd come up and make your comment, sir. Yeah, please, if you would. So if you push the button on the right-hand side, get out in front of you and push the button on the right-hand panel. Yeah. That's it. Just bring it over to you, the whole lot. Bring it all round to you. That's it. That's it. Excellent. Right-hand button. Yeah, that's it. Lights on.
Lights on.
3 minutes start when my colleague pushes the button and you start speaking.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I sit here both astonished and dismayed by the planning inspector's report. It would appear democracy is dead when one man can overturn the wishes of all the elected local councils. However, as we speak, the CPRE have a solicitor looking at the need for a judicial review. I think that if they have the chance, that Fletcher would like to speak afterwards. There was also a request for a governmental ministerial review in place, which in Little Ranger did before they finished last Tuesday week. I would therefore respectfully ask Somerset West and Taunton Council not to close this case until further serious questions have been answered as to whether anything can still be done. Among some of the questions that really need answering is why was the land grade not definitively believed when it was proved it was best and most versatile land? And the inspector said he chose to believe what we know to be a false land grade. Why was the cumulative effect not even mentioned in the report? By farm didn't come up once in the planning inspector's report. Why was the government ministerial report not, was only allowed, it was only the appellant that was allowed to comment on that report. When some of us tried to comment on it, we were refused on several occasions. And why was the farmer's hardship not given the relevant weight when they said I provided no figures, which are there all to see on the website? So that when he said there weren't any at all provided by me, they're still on the document section of the website for anyone to see. So I personally believe this planning application is not over yet, and there's still needs to be something to be done about it. Thank you very much if I have any support.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dole. So to finish the review.
He didn't register to speak.
Unfortunately, Mr. Dibble registered to speak, but you have not, sir. So, no, I know. Well, normally the review of the appeals is something that the committee does. We don't normally allow public speakers. I've allowed Mr. Dibble because of the situation. I'm not going to extend that to anybody else, simply because, well, sure, I appreciate, no, but if we took every reference to every outside body that somebody mentions, we would be here until breakfast. So my apologies, sir, but my planning colleague is going to discuss the rest of the decision from the inspector, and our lawyer is going to make some comments as well. Sarah.
Thank you. So in relation to the appeal at the land north of the transmitting station at Washford, Watchet Wilton, which is for the installation of ground-mounted solar farm, battery storage and associated development. The decision by the council was a committee one, and the inspector's decision was to allow the appeal. The inspector identified 3 main issues. First one being the effect on the character and appearance of the area. And the inspector noted that the site is not located within the national park, the AONB, or an area locally identified in terms of the setting of the AONB. The inspector therefore found that the proposal would not have a direct impact on the special qualities of the national park. The inspector also held that whilst the insertion of a solar farm with associated infrastructure would change the character and appearance of the area for a period of up to 40 years. This would be significantly mitigated by the sensitive landscaping, but also that the proposed development would be viewed from within the wider landscape, and that most viewers would see the proposal as a, bear with me a second, and I quote, a tiny part of a kinetic landscape when travelling through the AONB and or national park, rather than visually dominating feature within the landscape. Furthermore, when seen from limited viewpoints from within either the national park or the AONB, most viewers are likely to feel a heightened sense of specialness of those designated landscapes themselves and their importance, which in the main are devoid of modern developments, unquote. The second main issue the inspector considered was whether or not the proposal will result in an unacceptable loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. There was a number of bits of evidence that were submitted by various parties. The tenant farmers had submitted a report on the quality of the agricultural land, but due to the limited remit of the report and site assessments that were carried out, the inspector gave the report little weight. The CPRE had also submitted a soil site report, but the inspector found this report was for personal use based on a desktop assessment and contained no detailed analysis of the site itself. The inspector therefore gave this little weight. The appellant had submitted a report following a recognised methodology, including numerous soil profiles, samples and lab analysis. As the evidence was conflicting, the council sought an independent view that concluded there may be areas of the site that can be classified as grade 3A, i.e. it falls within the category of best, most versatile agricultural land. The inspector found that the appellant's evidence was the most thorough, and the inspector concluded the site did not contain land falling within best, most versatile agricultural land. The inspector found that the site was to be used for pastoral farming, and there was nothing to stop the site being used for agricultural purposes other than arable. That's my insertion there. As such, the proposal will not result in either temporary or permanent loss of best and most versatile agricultural land, nor would the proposal be detrimental to the soil quality, preventing its return to arable farming in the future. The inspector therefore concluded the proposal accorded with the local plan, the National Planning Policy Framework and the 2024 ministerial statement. The third item, main consideration, was the effect on heritage assets. The site is within the setting of a number of designated heritage assets. Historic England found the proposal would result in less than substantial harm, which should be afforded great weight in decision making. The inspector also concluded the proposal would result in less than substantial harm, albeit the inspector concluded that the level of harm was at the lower end of the scale. This level of harm was then weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, and the inspector concluded the creation of a significant renewable energy outweighed the less than substantial harm to the heritage assets. In addition to the three main areas of consideration, there were several other matters raised during the appeal, and the inspector held that the personal circumstances of the tenant farmers were a material consideration, but they did not provide justification to dismiss the appeal. In relation to tourism and benefits to local people, the inspector found there would be some local social and environmental benefits, and the proposal would not have an adverse impact on tourism. In relation to electromagnetism, biodiversity, highway safety and fire risk, the inspector found no reason to justify a refusal subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions. And in relation to this particular appeal, there was no application for costs. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bring Martin Evans in, our solicitor now. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly to address the comments by Mr. Dibble. You'll have heard the summary of the inspector's decision. Now, there is no right of appeal against an inspector's decision. The only way that it could be challenged now it's been given is effectively by a form of judicial review, and that would have to demonstrate that the inspector got something very wrong in law, or didn't take into account something that he should have taken into account, or there were procedural errors. So the scope for challenging an inspector's decision is very limited. The bodies who could challenge, that includes the council, but it also includes any other interested party affected by the decision. And you've heard mention of the CPRE potentially looking to challenge. Any decision to challenge an inspector's decision is not one for this committee, because this committee determines applications. Launching litigation is delegated to the monitoring officer in consultation with the head of legal. Whilst we heard what Mr. Dibble said, in terms of what this committee can do is note the decision. Obviously, officers will be reading the decision and have read the decision in detail, but beyond that, there's nothing else the committee can resolve in terms of what going forward now.
Questions? So start with Rosemary, then Andrew.
Yes, I think it's not democracy as we should know it. That an inspector can come in and look at something without knowing anything about our area. I think that's how it reads to me, because it's saying it doesn't have any impact on our tourism, but it's quite a prominent site for our tourists. They'll come down, have a look at our PVs. No, they won't. They've come down to look at green fields, I'm afraid. Well, not even afraid. I think that's good that they can enjoy our countryside. And it is visible from the national park. And it is, I was only up on the Quantox the other day, and I can see the other one that's there. So that would be visible as well. All right? I mean, it's so frustrating when you feel we spend hours in these meetings. We might as well not bother. Why don't we leave it to the inspectors?
No, I disagree with you, because I don't think we should leave it just to the inspectors. But we are where we are. The inspectors are there when an appeal is made, and the inspector is placed in that position. And there are a number of inspectors across the country, and they are given allocations, and they go off and they do their they do that. It is one of the quirks of the system that a planning inspector will not sit on an application that's in his own area. So you always get, in theory, a completely unbiased inspector who will look at the case dispassionately. That's the theory behind it. You'll be surprised to hear that I don't always agree with the inspector. It is frustrating. It is incredibly frustrating. I can think of a number of things we could do to improve the planning system, but unfortunately they don't listen to me. They tend to listen to the large developers. Okay, so Andy, sorry, Rosemary, I don't agree with you. I think the work we do is hugely valuable. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. And Martin said that basically it's the monitoring officer and the head of legal. So will they be having a chat now to just go through it to see if there is any criteria or any merit? I mean, as a betting man, what's the percentage you think it's like? Perhaps I should ask about a bet, but
I'll let Martin answer that.
Officers can hear the sentiment within the room. So we do review all appeal decisions that come in. So if there are grounds for challenge that have scope for success, and I'm not going to put a percentage on it or give it a figure, but we have previously, taken challenges against inspectors' decisions. Now, I'm certainly not saying in this case that that's going to be the case, because it's going to come down to a detailed analysis of the inspector's decision letter, which has not yet been done. So, but I will say, and listeners, the officers will take that away and look at it, look to see if there's anything within the letter that means there's a potential of illegality.
I wouldn't want to bin the whole system, and I've been the councillor for a long time, and I've seen decisions gone to committee and then gone one way, and then there's been an appeal and it's gone the other way, and it's deeply frustrating. I would feel equally frustrated as the gentleman who spoke, and also as the ward councillor did. It is incredibly frustrating, but I wouldn't want to bin the whole process of the whole system. The fact that there is somebody there, independent inspector, to look at this is a necessary check and balance, until somebody comes up with a better process. So the work that we do is very, very valuable. I think we get it right the vast majority of the time, but like it or not, I think it is right that the applicants have the right to a potential appeal if they want to, and we trust that the inspectors will make an independent decision. Sometimes they agree with what the committee said, occasionally they do not, and that is frustrating. But that, until somebody comes up with a better process, is part of the process. So I wouldn't want to be in the process of the appeal process, but I also value the good work that we do in this committee greatly.
Couldn't agree more, Ross. That's about where we are. Any other comments or queries? Okay, we're a few minutes after 6, but thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon and your consideration of all the items, and I look forward to our next meeting. Thank you and good evening.